emotionally completely because my entire identity was tied into powerlifting.
Would you be though? Or would you have
sure.
just found a way to be able to come back as fast as you can because you would take those emotions and make them all aggression?
When I've had slip-ups and cheated on my diet, it wasn't because I'm not disciplined.
Yes.
I'm a pro. I have discipline.
Yes.
There's a lot more psychologically that's going on.
So how do you get to that point?
Therapy, a lot of therapy.
It's time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk. All right, guys, we're back with another episode of Table Talk. Today, my guests are Paul and Olivia Oneid. Paul's been out a couple times, I think.
I was on the podcast once. I've been out here a bunch, yeah.
And we had the schedule and had to reschedule, so we'll talk about why that is.
Yeah.
You're both coaches and mentors. You've done basically everything, from athlete, coach, mentor, coach of coaches, athlete, coach. We'll talk a little bit more where you fall as far as the mentor and how you fit into all this as well, because I don't really know that one except for what GPT and my own research kind of showed. And so I kind of broke this down into a few. Is there anything I forgot in your introduction that I should bring up?
No. I just want to highlight, you guys being so generous and rescheduling for us, that meant a lot to me. And I think it speaks to the character of you and the company. We'll go into it, but tearing both quads and having to cancel. We had to cancel our honeymoon. We had to cancel this podcast, and just have the reassurance. You're like, hey, when you're ready, we'll have you down. That meant the world to us. So thank you.
Well, that's going to jump right into the first topic I want to get into, which is basically triumphs and challenges, right? So you have your quad tear and then your pro card, right? So where do we want to start? Let's start with the quad tear because you already talked about that.
So I hadn't competed in about
quad tears.
The knees exploded, actually.
Yeah.
So I hadn't competed in about 2.5 years, had an ongoing issue with left hip and left knee that kind of rendered my training prior to that to one single a week on the squat. I couldn't train beyond that volume. I got to work with Danny LaMartina for over 2 years, and it was life-changing in terms of day-to-day pain, ability to train. I got to the point where I was full-on training, all good, no issues. Had a really shitty squat rep about 4 weeks out and didn't really think anything of it. Just some knee pain. We managed it really well. On the meet day, I showed up. I felt awesome. Took my first 2 attempts. The first attempt was a little shaky. Second attempt, I kind of locked it in. And my plan was to go 782 just for a very small walked out PR. Just walk away. My PR all time is 805, and I've squatted over 800 14 times. So it's 782 will be fine. But after the opener, second, I was I'll take 750 on my third. It was only a 20-pound jump. We'll do that. We'll move on. We'll have a great meet. And this was supposed to be a tune-up. The walkout felt a little off. As soon as I initiated the squat, my weight was way too far back on my heels, and I ended up having to cut it high. And instead of just letting the spotters take it, I was like, okay, I'm just going to stand this up. It's going to be like shit. But as soon as I went to push, my hips went further back, my shoulders were over my toes, and my knees buckled. I heard that pop, pop, then it was gone. And it was I dumped the bar behind me, and unfortunately, one of the spotters did end up hurting himself. He pinched his pinky under the bar and lost the tip of his finger, which, Sean, if you're listening to this, I'm very, very sorry. He had a great sense of humor about it, actually. He lost his nail, but he got a nail tattooed on his finger. And he left a review for the venue, this place will always have a piece of me. And it was a 4.9 star review. Great sense of humor on the guy. But that was a really abrupt experience. It was so many emotions in such a short period of time. But for me, from the moment I felt the pop to my knees hitting the floor to my chest hitting the floor, felt like 20 minutes. It was just pure acceptance. I've been doing this for 15 years. It was pop, pop. All right, this is what it is. This is going to suck. I was totally calm. I'm grateful there was no pain. It's just a lot of pressure. Obviously the adrenaline dump and everything like that. And the people around me were quite calm as well. because I was calm, and that helped a lot. They helped me back to the back room, and then I didn't really have a flood of emotions until I saw Liv, because I knew in that moment, I knew I was fucked up, but I knew that she would have to take the brunt of it, right? I couldn't do anything for myself at that point, so she would have to do it. So that was July 14th. Had surgery the next day. We were 7 hours from home, and we ended up staying 9 days in the hospital because of the Canadian healthcare system. And
So where was the surgery? Did you go home before?
No. So we ended up getting to the emergency room. He did an ultrasound very aggressively. And then they took me for x-rays. Even like right as we got back to the emergency room bay from the x-rays, doctor comes around the corner. He's like, you need surgery. You can either do it here, or we can throw you in the car, drive 7 hours and go home to the hospital in Ottawa. We got fortunate. The hospital we were at, the Collingwood Hospital, was an orthopedic center because there's a huge mountain beside us. So I said, no, I don't want to go home because we're going to end up waiting in the emergency room anyway. It's 7 hours. It'll be miserable.
There's also no way we would be able to get you in the car.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's also true. Yeah. So we ended up staying there, having the surgery. The injury itself was the same on both sides. It was an avulsion fracture of my patella. So I guess from the years of dealing with knee pain over like my entire career, essentially, bone spurs on the tops of my patellas broke off. And when they broke off, they took the quad tendon with it. So for anyone who's familiar with this nature of injury, it's a fortunate way to tear your quad, because I didn't have any muscle damage. I didn't have any tendon damage. They just went in, cleaned up the bone, anchored the tendon back to the patella, sutured it up, and then I'm in braces essentially.
Mm-hmm.
That hospital stay was rough. Liv was trying to figure out where she was going to live for the entire stay. Switched hotels, twice?
2 or 3 times, yeah.
Yeah, and then we got lucky. A family friend allowed her to stay with them in their Airbnb. Finally, Liv's mom drove 2 hours. On the 9th day, I ended up kind of taking matters into my own hands because they wanted to send me back home. Initially, they didn't want to pay for it. Then they said they were going to pay for it. Then they weren't. Then they were saying, go home, but you can't go. We can't discharge you unless you have equipment at home, like a hospital bed, a wheelchair, commode, those sorts of things. But the people in Ottawa wouldn't give it to me until they assessed me. But they can't assess me because I'm not in Ottawa. So then I would have to buy it myself. And then they come to us. It was a very complicated situation. Finally, on the Monday, I made 21 phone calls, was able to secure the equipment delivery for that afternoon. Liv's mom dropped everything she was doing, drove to pick us up. We all of us drove. We put me in the back of her SUV on like this camping mattress. So I was just laid out in the back of the SUV, folded down the chairs.
Now, outside of the wheelchair, what was it that you had to get that was hard to get?
So I couldn't get up the stairs at our house.
Yeah.
So I needed a hospital bed for my office. So I essentially turned my office into a hospital room.
Mm-hmm.
I also couldn't get to the bathroom because the wheelchair wouldn't fit in our what's called powder room basement there in the main floor. So I needed a commode, and basically like that was it.
Yeah.
We also needed the wheelchair with the leg supports.
Yeah.
Because he had to have his legs straight.
Mm.
Yeah. So that all sorted itself out. Liv's mom drove 2 hours to us, 7 hours home, slept, took our 3 dogs, drove them back to Toronto another 5.5 hours, so that they were with her for the extent of my recovery, because it just would have been too much.
So how'd you get back?
Liv's mom.
In a car, van? I mean,
she
throwing you back of a pickup truck?
Pretty much.
SUV, yeah. Folded the back seats down and put a mattress in the back. So I was just chilling in the mattress. Yeah. And then it was supposed to be 6 weeks in a wheelchair. It ended up being about 4.5. Then it was supposed to be 4 weeks on a walker with my knees locked in the braces. That ended up being
An afternoon.
Finally, after about 3 or 4 days, I unlocked the braces and was walking very slowly. And then ever since my feet hit the floor, it's been a very, very quick progression. So as of today, we're 14 weeks. I have full flexion. I can actually leg press with better range of motion now than I could before the surgery. Pain day to day, next to nothing. I have some weird discomfort in the back of my knee because my tibia is not rotating properly. So it's just something I'll continue to have to address with the rehab. Now I was able to do some Hatfield squats to full depth, 170 pounds. So it's just progression, daily progression, and trying to be humble throughout the whole process and not push it because I have no rush.
Yeah, so if we back it up, what was your motivation to do the meet in the first place?
To prove that I could still do it. Yeah, it was, I had felt like from the last time I competed, I said I wouldn't compete unless I was pain-free, and I ended up getting pain-free, and it was just a natural progression of, I think I can be stronger than I was, because I had deadlifted more in training, I had benched more in training. It was just the squat, being able to train it enough. But working with Danny and getting out of pain, my legs grew like crazy. I was 250 pounds of abs. And I was like, there's no way I'm not stronger right now. And I need to see if I am. So this tune-up was supposed to be for a meet in December, where I was going to take Jeremy Hamilton's Canadian record. Yes, I know Amit Sapir has the record, but it's Jeremy's because Amit squats high as fuck. And Jeremy's been a mentor of mine, great friend. And I told him, like, if anyone is going to break your record, I want it to be me. And that was ultimately the goal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Whose name is in the books? Is it Amit?
Amit, yeah.
Yeah. So it's more of a personal thing.
More of a personal thing, yeah.
You also, like, your last meet wasn't like your greatest meet either. So you wanted to finish off your powerlifting career with something good. Yeah. We knew November was going to be like the end.
Yeah.
His retirement.
Yeah. That's another thing. Like, I knew in the meet was, I think, end of November, beginning of December. I knew that at that point, I'm like, I'm leaving my belt on the platform. We're done.
So where is it now?
My belt?
No. Is it closed or not?
Oh, it's closed. Oh yeah, for sure.
It's closed.
Mm-hmm. It's closed. Yeah. The trade-off after going through this, realizing, like, I'm 37 years old, and I know that's not very old, but I've been competing for 15 years. Knowing what it would take to get back to that point, and knowing the risks associated with it, and the shift in my priorities as a human being, the juice isn't worth the squeeze for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we want to have children. I want to be able to play on the floor with our kids. I want to be a present father, and I can't do that if I can't bend my legs.
So is there still any part of you that's kind of thinking that, because there is that challenge of this is a major injury, mm-hmm. and coming back and being where you were before is a huge, how I would say, it's a huge W stamp of doing that. You know, I get the decision because I've had to make that same decision, right. But with that decision also comes that other inner battle.
For me, the competing, the PRs, it came as a secondary to the process. So for me, the process of returning from injury, like I said, we're 14 weeks. I'm 7 weeks ahead of schedule of where I should be. And I haven't done anything that has caused me pain or anything like that. I've approached it with what I would say is a mindset of a leader, someone who walks the walk, and I've maintained my priorities as a man. And for me, that's very important. The end result of stepping on a platform, I love training more than I loved competing. So as long as I can get back to training, I'm good. When
will you know that you're back from the injury?
When I'm not scared to bend my knees.
All right. So is there a weight associated with that?
Not really, to be honest.
I mean, just mentally going into a hard set and not having any fear behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like last night we were training with Jaden, and they had done hack squats, and I did some leg press, and my leg press felt great. I'm like, I'm going to try the empty hack squat. I was sweating more doing that one rep of hack squat mm-hmm. than I was the whole rest of the workout. And I'm like, as soon as I can get over that fear, I'll be good to go. And that's kind of the fear is what it would be, the KPI for sure.
Okay. All right. It's interesting to note or mm-hmm. to put that out there, because on the competitor, they're going to have a number.
Yeah.
You know, like as soon as I get back to 750, whatever, mm-hmm. then I know it's good. And then when you retire, it's a different thing of where you kind of benchmark that to be able to know, because that's also going to determine when you're going to feel comfortable really pushing the training as hard as you would like to push the training?
So it's interesting you put it that way. So I've had glimpses of what I would say would be I'm back moments. And a few of and they might seem trivial to people, but until you've been through something like this, I don't think you'll understand. So even when we were training last night, I was able to take a set of leg extension to actual failure and fail in the muscle with no pain. Huge win. Being able to do leg curls and actually grind through reps without my central nervous system going, stop.
Yeah, or shaking.
And I still have moments like that, but I did a lot of isometric training, so my motor control is quite good now. I'm sure we'll get into the whole rehab stuff, but yeah, it's just little things like that, daily wins. And I get told all the time, and I think about this stuff a lot because I live in my own head, but people will say, rehab must be such a grind. I'm like, it could be. But every day I have wins. If I look deep enough, there are wins every single day that I could take. So essentially the motivation just keeps feeding on top of itself. And it's been kind of fun.
Well, there's more, and I get what you're saying, but I can see where people would kind of think, what the hell did you just say?
I know.
Because there are actually more wins.
Yeah.
Because you're starting at Z. You know what I'm saying? Like, just to be able to do a Hatfield squat high, quarter squat is the first win. Like, sometimes the hardest weight to lift is 135. Right? And people don't understand that till it's taken away and you can't even lift your body weight. Yeah. And then to get a plate on each side is a big deal. But every training, you see what I'm saying? Every training session is built, it's better than the last. And that's not true when you're in top shape.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And in that case, it's probably the inverse. Most training sessions are not going as you would like them to go.
Yeah, most training sessions are shit.
Yeah, then every now and again it's like, oh shit, I'm on par. I'm on track. So it is different from that standpoint, but it's coupled with that depression associated with tearing both quads off.
And I would be lying if I said that there weren't bad days.
Yeah.
Especially those first days. Like, I remember the Friday we were in the hospital. They had been telling us the whole time, we're going to sort this out. You'll be able to go home. And then it was 4:30 on Friday, and they're like, we can't get your equipment. So we knew we were going to be in there all weekend. We both cried. We just looked at each other and just so disheartened. That was a bad day. I mean, I had bad days at home, knowing how hard Liv was working and feeling like a burden on your partner. For me, that's a huge emotional trigger, as I'm sure it would be for anybody. But for me, that was a big one. There were some bad days associated with that. But I mean, I'm so grateful to have a partner who I can share these feelings with. And also, we have a relationship where I do hope everyone has this sort of relationship where you can say to your partner, hey, this is how I'm feeling. And they can say, I'm sorry, I can't do anything about that. And then you just move on.
Yeah.
Like that's a really, really important conversation to have. And we had a bunch of those. The one that sticks out into my mind, it was like 9:00 at night. She was exhausted. And keep in mind, I injured myself 5 weeks after her show where she won her pro card and competed 2 weeks prior. So 2 shows, 5 weeks later, your husband tears both his quads. She's not back to feeling her best. She's still feeling that post-show depression herself. And now she has to be a full-time caretaker for her husband, who should, for all intents and purposes, be taking care of her at that point. She was struggling at the end of the night, and I felt so deeply inside me that I was essentially doing her a disservice. And I said to her, I'm like, this is how I'm feeling about your mind state right now. Can we do anything about it? And she looked at me, she said, I can't add making you feel better about me being stressed to my plate. I was like, you're totally right. You can't, nor should you. I'm going to figure this out for myself. And we had a couple conversations like that. And to me, that's a partnership, and it's
no, it is. I mean, it's kind of how it should work, because there's, I've had several times to where, I'm not able to go to the restroom myself.
Oh, we had that too.
All those type of things, right? And that's a burden on somebody else, but it's also extremely humbling to you, because your pride, right? You know, you're pissed, you're upset, but you still have to take a shit and wipe your ass. So it doesn't really matter how you feel.
Well, at one point I couldn't wipe my ass.
Exactly. I've been in the same position.
You know, and I mean, maybe this is an overshare, but the only thing going through my mind is she still going to want to have sex with me after this?
That's kind of fucked up.
It is.
Yeah.
Because, to put this into perspective.
Yeah, I'm trying to do that right now, and I need some help.
My knee. So the first 2 weeks, I wasn't allowed to bend my knees at all. And in the hospital, the pain and pressure was so much after the nerve block wore off. I remember you messaged me. You're like, "Hey, after this, it's gonna suck." I was like, "Yeah, sure, Dave." And
yeah.
The next day, boom. I couldn't have my feet below my hips, or else it was too much of a stretch in the quad. So when I had to go to use the restroom after 5 days because of the narcotics, I had to like shift my butt off the bed onto the commode, which is essentially a chair with a bucket. So my feet are on the bed, my butt's on this commode, and it's so narrow because I'm 250 pounds that I can't shift my weight or lift myself up. There's no wiping happening.
No.
And the nurse took care of it for a while, and then the one day there was an emergency on the floor and my foot went numb while I was sitting on the commode, and I called her. I was like, "Babe, it's time. You got to do it." She's a champ.
Gotta get it done.
Yeah. No, it can be challenging on a relationship, but on the other end of it is rewarding, right? Because it would expose things that you haven't been exposed to before. And you'll see, I mean, especially being called out, like, no, at this point, take care of it yourself, which kind of, if you're being honest, it kind of pisses you off too, right? Where it's like, yeah, thanks for that. But the other side of your head's like, you know, you're not cool with it, but somebody has to call you out on your own shit, you know, to be able to push it forward.
I don't know. Maybe you can, I feel like I was so motivated to get better and get this off your shoulders that we didn't have to deal with that.
Yeah. You were doing everything you possibly could. And that was relieving for me to see, because I knew that this would all be done a little bit sooner. But I know how much of a burden he felt like. But at the same time, I was telling him, like, you're not a burden on me, because there's nowhere else I would rather be than taking care of you right now. Like, there's nothing else that I should or could be doing.
Yeah. And I mean, talk about everything I could be doing. I was muscle stem 3 times a day. I did my exercises from my PT 3 times a day. I was sitting in a PAMF machine for 4 hours a day. And then as soon as I could bend my knee, we were doing a ton of isometrics, ton of everything. And it just continues. At one point I calculated it was 8 hours a day of rehab stuff on top of working. Cause even the morning I'm waiting for surgery, I'm doing my check-ins with my clients because they got to get taken care of.
Yeah.
And that never stopped. And I think it was a nice distraction as well to be like, okay, I can live for other people in this moment and pour into others to take the stress of my own situation off my shoulders.
Well, it's also the reality of being an entrepreneur and having your own business. True. Yeah. You know, it's not like you can just put it on pause.
No.
You know, for 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Somebody has to do it. You know, so you have to do it. I don't think a lot of people that thrive to be entrepreneurs think a lot of these things through. No. You know, because it's the reality of it. So let's jump over to your pro show, or winning your pro card, which was before this. So what was that whole process like? Or actually, how did you get into it in the first place?
How did I get into bodybuilding? When I first started training, I was at more of like a powerlifting style gym. I definitely, and there was bodybuilders there too. There was a good mix of bodybuilding and powerlifting. And there was like your typical bodybuilding coaches that would be like, "Oh, you should compete." Like, I see you in here working hard. And I was like, no. I knew I didn't have a great relationship with food. And that was one thing that I knew going into the sport of bodybuilding that needed to be taken care of first. So I wanted to make sure I was in a good spot with that. And then come COVID time, when all the gyms were closed, I was into like Olympic weightlifting, CrossFit at that point. I didn't have a gym to train at. So I was like, I'll jump into a bodybuilding prep. I'll do something just to spend some time over COVID, have something to look forward to. So I went into that first show, no prior bodybuilding training really, just powerlifting, CrossFit, Olympic lifting. It was fun. I didn't do great by any means, but it definitely confirmed that I wanted to continue doing it.
And when was that?
2021.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the first show. Took some time off. I met Paul in the middle of that prep, so that's when we started dating, and then I knew I needed to take off quite a bit of time to put on some more muscle mass. So about a year and a half later, I was going to compete again. I did a powerlifting, my first powerlifting meet in the middle of that, and I decided to self-coach myself going into that second season of bodybuilding, which went well. I had Paul's kind of like second opinion and voice in my ear letting me know I'm making the right decisions. But at the end of the day, I think coaching yourself adds a lot of stress onto your plate with making those judgment calls as you get close to show day. So in that season, I did like a regional show and then qualified to go to nationals. Going into nationals, I was just completely gassed out. Like I put my foot on the gas pedal too long, too hard. I didn't know better to like tell myself to slow down and like take some breaks, because I was just like, I can do more. And that's why you need that person telling you to slow down more often.
Well, the feedback too is that you need to, after the regional show, the feedback was like, hey, just come in a little tighter and you'll do well. So she's like, okay, gas pedal.
Yeah. How would you define gassed out?
Just too much cardio. Like I was just nailing myself with cardio way too far out from the show. So like 10 weeks out, I was already doing 45, 60 minutes of cardio, not giving myself any refeed days or high days or anything like that. Anything to bring down the stress and the inflammation that I needed. And then that kind of ended up being like unintentional high days where I would go a little bit overboard, right? And just ending up with binges here and there and then trying to compensate, because I didn't have anyone being like, okay, this happened. Let's regroup. Let's just set a new plan from here, right? And that's why it's extremely helpful to have an outside perspective helping you go through that. So after
what does that lead to post show though, when you go in like that?
Like going in with
so the show's over, right? And you full throttle into that. So then what's it like when the show's over?
Oh, a disaster.
Yeah.
Hormonal disaster, mentally, like, again, that binging, yo-yoing, it's tough to come back to. And it's hard to also have those conversations with your partner about that as well, because you kind of want to separate your relationship and like that from what you're struggling with on the athletic aspect, I guess. So having someone else to confide in and to keep you on track and to keep you working towards that.
Yeah, it was a weird situation too, because her second show, that national show, was 5 weeks out from my first bodybuilding show. So I was still dieting.
Yeah.
So I think what happened was she wanted to like enjoy her food and enjoy her time, but I couldn't be there for her because I was 5 weeks out from my first show. It was a learning opportunity for
Well,
sure.
it's also a different dynamic because you're living together at the time, I assume.
Yep.
Right. So you're living together. You kind of both work from home, right?
Yep.
So you're around each other all the time. So the only thing that's really yours that's not being shared is the training and that.
Yeah.
You know, so I can see why it's like you don't want to overshare all that, because like, goddamn, we already overshare everything else. Like, what can I keep that's just mine? Right. So is part of that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah. There's also like a little bit of shame too when it happens as well, and I'm sure a lot of bodybuilders can relate to this. When it's happening, it's like you don't want to tell anyone, right? But second show around, like having Austin, who's been on your podcast before, in my corner to confide in, and like whenever I had slip ups, letting him know right away and being like, okay, this is a normal human physiological response. Let's regroup and we'll move on from here. All right. So going into that second season, I was like, I've learned a lot about myself, about this process. I'm going into it much more developed as a person, mentally and physically. And I absolutely know the pro card is within reach now. So I went into the season like, I'm doing this. This is exactly what I want, and I'm going to put everything into this. So I had to do another regional show to qualify again because it had been over a year since my last competition. And then 2 weeks later, went into Toronto Pro, and that's where I got my pro card.
Mm-hmm. And then what was that like for you?
Surreal. Very, very surreal. I had a lot of self-doubt going into it, like many athletes. I knew I wanted it. I knew it was there, but you never know who's going to show up. You never know what the judges are going to think. So I was nervous going into it, like, okay, I've put everything into this. I have so many people who look up to me, who are supporting me, who help me through this. What if I let them down? Right? Austin came all the way out to Toronto. What if that was for no reason? What if I'm going to let him down? Right? So there's just a lot of self-doubt, and I did my best to like not look at any other competitors before going into it, but then on show day, then you start seeing everyone there and you start getting into your own head. But after prejudging, I walked out. They moved me right into the middle. Didn't move anything else. It was immediate, like you're in the middle, and then all of a sudden it's done. I was like, holy shit, what just happened?
Yeah.
Got off stage. I'm like, did that just happen? Am I in first? Am I getting my pro card? And so then it's just a waiting game for a few hours until you're back out on stage. And I got my pro card, and it just all goes by so fast. So I was trying really hard to just like be in the moment, because at that point I knew I was winning. I knew I was getting a pro card. So it's like, okay, slow down, breathe, enjoy this, because it's going to be done in 30 seconds. Mm-hmm. So. Yeah.
What were some of the biggest takeaways from training for that show that you had?
Trust the process, really. There was a lot of times where I was telling Austin, like, I can go harder. But it's like, okay, what did I learn about this from my last prep when I did go harder and it drove me into a hole? So trusting your coach, trusting the process, knowing that you are so much stronger mentally than you think that you are. There were a lot of days towards the tail end where I would be like barely able to stand in the kitchen. I'm like leaning on the kitchen counter. I'm dizzy. I can barely think. I can barely hold a conversation. And I'm looking at Paul. I'm like, why the fuck am I doing this? I never want to do this again. I literally do not think I can make it through the day. And then you wake up the next day and then you do it again. And I was like, okay, that wasn't that bad. I can do it again today. And then it's just repeating that same mantra over to yourself. I can make it through one more day.
Well, the concept of pushing harder intrigues me, because you can go to where you are burning yourself out, right? And even now you'll refer to that as pushing too hard, and then compare that to trusting the process, and which is actually the harder of the two. Trusting the process is actually the harder of the two. The easier of the two is just to run yourself into the ground. And that's like a default that a lot of people will use, because they think it's being all in or training harder, to where actually it's the inverse of that. Being all in or going harder is kind of doing the things that you don't really want to do but have to do anyhow, which is, in this case, trusting the process. Yeah. You know, for a power lifter, not maxing out every single time they go in the gym, you know, or whatever it is, because they'll think that that's not pushing hard. But sometimes pulling back is actually pushing harder.
Yeah, because there's days where Austin would be like, okay, no cardio today, refeed. I'm like, well, I feel fine, so I can push. It's like, no, but you need to pull back, because if you continue pushing, you're not going to be able to push when it actually matters.
Yeah. But mentally, that's really not pulling back. You know, that's harder. You get where I'm going with that?
The line that I always come back to is, people will say they'll do anything that's required to succeed until anything means nothing. I mean, I ran into that in my recovery. 3 weeks out, 3 weeks after my surgery, I was like, I can stand up. It's like, Yeah, but don't fucking do that because your bone hasn't healed yet. In the same sense, like, I can push harder. It's like, yeah, but you still have 5 more weeks and you're flat right now. So let's fill you back up and let's regroup for the next push and just continue to repeat that process. If you're able to back off and do that and you see the results over and over again, it builds that coach-athlete relationship. One of the things that sticks out as a prime moment in Liv's prep was she had a day where she had one of those mental days where she cheated on her diet, essentially. I hope you don't mind me saying that. But afterwards, it was the morning, she was going to send pictures to Austin. She's like, I don't want to send these pictures. I was like, you have to send the pictures and you have to tell him because he's going to support you through this because he's your coach and you trust him. And you did that. And his response was exactly what she needed in that moment. Immediately, I could see her shoulders drop and everything was good. And from that moment on, there was no other issues. But as someone who has self-coached for so long, like you self-coached for almost 2 years, to be, and previously, I don't think you had that same coach-athlete relationship. So to be in that position and trust your coach with being vulnerable and have the response that you needed in that moment is so validating to know, like, okay, I'm still okay. I don't have to redeem myself from this. I just have to regroup and get back to doing exactly what I was doing.
Well, as coaches yourself, there's the other side of that. How does that coach build that rapport with the client to be able to have that?
Yeah. Because it's a funny thing because it's like I'm thinking that of myself when at the same time I'm telling my clients, like, be vulnerable with me. Tell me everything.
Yeah.
Like, I'm never going to be upset about it. Right. And I think just making sure that your athletes know that they have that safe space to be honest and that I'll never be upset creates that environment and that healthy coach athlete relationship that I think everyone needs.
Well, with all the athletes that you guys have had, over all the years, how often is that the case that you are able to build that rapport? Because it's two-sided now. So you can't just sit there and say, well, the great coaches know how to do that, right? Because you're still going to have the people that are short-term come and go that, you have to learn to vet them out, and that takes time. You see what I'm saying? So
I have 2 answers for you. The first one is a business coach answer. It's every single aspect of your system in coaching needs to be geared towards creating that. So from the moment you first speak to somebody, whether it be through an Instagram DM or a cold inquiry through your website, everything that you do with that person needs to make them feel like they're your only client. That comes down to, like, for us, our onboarding process, from the moment someone clicks purchase to the moment they actually touch base with us the first time, we've already actually, quote unquote, spoken to them every single day. Then from there, everything is personalized. Everything is very in tune to the needs of that individual. So from a business perspective, your systems have to mirror the outcome that you're after. So if the outcome you're after is a deep and meaningful coach-athlete relationship, we have to develop systems that foster that. The other answer to that question is you have to actually give a shit. And I think in a space right now, and I tell this to any new mentee that comes in, is that this industry is saturated with people. It is not saturated with coaches. And there's a difference between somebody who writes a program and a protocol and someone who actually coaches an individual. So when you're communicating with that person, are you actually listening in order to hear them, or are you listening to respond? Are you creating that safe space and offering your own vulnerability to them so that they feel comfortable reciprocating that? Are you available to them when they need you? Are your responses timely? All of these things play a role. So you being that person who in everything you do shows that you actually give a shit is going to create that coach-athlete relationship that you're after. And it takes time. And some clients are not committed to it. In fact, some clients don't want it. I have a number of clients who've actually been with me for a very long time, whom I only speak to once a week when they do their check-ins, and that's all they want from me. That's okay. But I had to learn that, and I had to ask them about that, and I had to know what their needs were over time to give them exactly what they wanted and needed, and continue to do that consistently without fail, so that they're never going to leave. Plain and simple.
Is that because you work with coaches too? Right?
Yes.
So when you're onboarding these coaches, is that the biggest discrepancy that they have in their current process before they come on with mentorships with you?
I would say the biggest issue that they have is being able to speak to the person they want to speak with. And what I mean by that is, in every business, you have this ideal client avatar. I know it's been a kind of a catchphrase, but it holds true. You have to speak to that person. You have to deeply understand that person. So using Liv as an example, her client avatar is a woman who wants to train her ass off, improve herself in mind and body, and bring the best version of herself forward. Everything Olivia posts and everything she says publicly and everything she represents within her own outward portrayal is that. So all of her clients are that. And when you're bringing on people who are already bought in to you and what you represent, most of the work is already done, because they want what you're offering. And if your offering is the coach-athlete relationship that you want to build, all you have to do is follow the systems that you've already got in place, continue to give a shit, and be the person that you want, because they already want what you're giving them.
So how would the coaches that are reaching out to you for the mentorship, who have multiple avatars,
Right.
because what they generally do is just take whoever they can get, because it's a monetary thing.
For sure.
Right. And then what they're stuck with is maybe 10% of the avatar, with a lot of questions here, 10% of the avatar they really want to train, but probably don't realize that 10% isn't a big enough market,
Right.
to actually be served, which is kind of like the first question.
For sure.
So, I mean, the obvious answer isn't going to happen is they got to get rid of all the avatars that don't fit their model, where
You're not going to do that.
Nobody's going to do that.
No.
So it's got to be this gradual
Absolutely.
phasing out through.
It's iterative. It's definitely iterative. But one of the things that I think people miss is that even though outwardly these clients might only be 10% of quote unquote what you're looking for, the clients that you're bringing in are a representation of what you're putting out. The other thing is, no one can see who you're coaching. Like, no one looks at my roster and says, well, Paul coaches a mom over here and he coaches a Navy SEAL over here. What do they have in common? And that's the question, is what do they have in common? And what you'll notice is that even across multiple avatars of people, there are commonalities amongst them. And usually that's psychographic, right? You look at the type of mentality that person approaches. I just did a call with a new client this week, and he said, I didn't really know to reach out to you because I looked at your background and it looks like you only coach really serious athletes. And I stopped him. I said, nope, I coach people who want to approach their training like serious athletes. And he was like, oh, that's me. Yes, it is. Absolutely. Based on everything you're telling me, that's you. So this guy's a doctor, whereas I have a single mom. I have, like I said, a Navy SEAL. I have a guy who's training for U.S. Special Forces. I have a couple CFL guys, but they all approach their training, their nutrition, their physical and mental performance like athletes. So that's been a challenge for us as a company, because we have, including ourselves, we have 7 coaches. Each of those 7 coaches has a different ideal client avatar. But what we're learning through research on our clients and interviewing our clients, and we're going to continue to dive into this more and more as we grow our business, is what are the commonalities amongst this people, and how can we continue to bring in more people like that? Because our retention rates are amazing, because our service quality is very high, but I think our retention rates are also amazing because there's so many commonalities amongst those people, and we're still learning, and that's an ongoing process.
Yeah, it's just a different way to look at the avatar, right? To where I think people see them as certain like competitive bodybuilders, powerlifters,
My
or whatever it is.
Single moms who want to lose 10 pounds in 6 weeks.
Yeah. Where, with Elite FTS, I've always kind of looked at it as people that place training as one of their top 4 priorities, right? Very easy to describe. And then it covers all these different that's why I don't like the word avatar in many cases, because the avatar is going to bring a certain visual aspect to your brain.
Right.
That's going to fall into an athlete or a specific sport, the very, very defined demographic. But that defined demographic, a lot of times it's very genetically based, you know, so let's pull that out. And who's to say that the single mom, right, doesn't have all the same attributes as the competitive bodybuilder, but the missing component is all the biological genetic components. So it's it's like a hidden avatar.
Yeah, there's also the aspect of that single mom probably has different priorities. That single mom has different time constraints. That single mom has different needs from a perspective of the relationship they want to have with their coach. The amount of, I mean, you could speak to this, the amount of sharing that's required when dealing with someone who is a parent, for lack of a better, description. But at the core of it all, there are commonalities. And I think you need to find those. You need to exploit those when you're talking, and essentially just put out more of exactly what you want back. And I would never tell anyone to get rid of clients, especially if their clients are, I just had a conversation with one of the coaches that I coach. He's like, I don't see a lot of my client avatar in my business, in my roster. Should I drop them because I don't want people to think I don't coach this type of person? And I was like, but how are these people not that? And he kind of took a step back. He's like, aren't they all committed? Aren't they all serious about what they're doing? Aren't they all, involved with the process and great clients for you? He's like, yeah, so keep them. They're awesome clients. But that doesn't mean that you need to stop chasing this other thing that you're looking for.
So would you say that the avatars that you're talking about would be more value and priority based?
Yeah, you could say that for sure.
I'm just trying to think of how you could define
conceptualize it. Yeah, it's tough to conceptualize.
Because you got to bucket
broadly,
them, right? Because especially if you have a company and you have people working with different avatars, each one of those is a different bucket, for lack of a better name. And they're all going to be based, as I'm thinking through what you're saying, values and priorities. It's going to kind of determine where that's going to be in that bucket.
Yeah. I mean, I think I speak for most of us and probably a lot of coaches when it's like, you just want your clients to be willing to do the work. Right? Like all my roster of clients, like I have some athletes stepping on national stage for bodybuilding, taking national and world records in powerlifting. And then I have someone who has never tracked a macro before. Right. But something in common with everyone across that spectrum is that they're willing, willing to change.
Yeah. When they're willing to do the work, scale based upon the bucket. Right, because the willing to do the work is going to change defined by what they think the work is.
Yep.
Right, because if they never really done work before that you would see as a 10, that's going to be a different bucket than somebody that would fall in a 2, which would be a different coach.
That's something that you and I spoke about the last time I was on the podcast. Was the hardest thing you've ever done is the hardest thing you've ever done.
Yeah.
So a 10 for me, having been like pain scale, great example. I know what my 10 out of 10 is. When I go to physio now and he's like, how much is that out of 10? Whereas before I'd be like, oh, it's a 7. Now it's a 2. The same thing goes for exactly what you're saying. So someone who's never tracked a macro, tracking macros might be an 8 out of 10 difficulty. But for someone stepping on a stage, tracking macros is a 1. The relative willingness to do the work, I think, is where that comes into play. Like, relatively speaking, they're willing to push themselves outside their comfort zones and do the work required to extend that range.
So then work becomes redefined as, say, discipline.
I don't know how I feel about the word discipline. What do you feel about the word
discipline? I get that, because that becomes another one that's hard to define.
Yeah.
Kind of where that all sits in there.
Yeah, I mean,
I guess where I'm kind of going is, if you have different coaches fulfilling these different avatars, are there points in time where a client needs to move from one to another?
We haven't actually come to that point yet.
Where a client needs to move to another coach?
Yeah. We haven't come to that point yet.
No, because I think part of being a good coach too is growing with those athletes.
Being adaptable. We also have a triage process. So when a lead comes in or when a new client comes in, we have a triage process to make sure we fit them with the best coach possible for them. I think we do a pretty good job of that, but I agree with Liv. I think the most important part is being adaptable. So, you know, you might have a client come in, let's use that client who's never tracked macros before, and they come and work with me. I know exactly how to be adaptable in order to bring that person to ultimately the level of control that they need in order to get the results that they want. And the same thing goes for if an athlete stepping on a national stage comes to Liv, she knows exactly how to be adaptable in her approach to bring that person to where they need to be in order to get to where they need to go.
Summer's here and so is the heat. I've spent most of my life training in unconditioned gyms, and I know most of you that are training in garage gyms, private gyms, black iron gyms, know what I'm talking about when I say the heat sucks. It kills your motivation to go to the gym, it kills your performance, but it doesn't have to if you keep your electrolytes up. That's why today's episode is sponsored by Element. Element is a tasty electrolyte drink with everything you need and nothing you don't. This means lots of salt with none of the junk. No sugar, no colors, no artificial ingredients, no gluten, no fillers, no BS. It contains an electrolyte ratio of 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium. Element can help prevent and eliminate headaches, muscle cramps, fatigue, brain fog, sleeplessness, and other common symptoms associated with electrolyte deficiency. Right now, Element is offering a free sample pack with any drink mix purchase. Get yours at drinkelement.com. This deal is only available through the Table Talk link. All right, so with every client, you're going to have their strengths and their weaknesses, right? I mean, we're breaking down to powerlifting and just say exercises, right? It's really easy to understand. You know, they have the things they're good at and the things that they suck at. Now, based upon their work, discipline, and this undefinable characteristic that we're kind of speaking about, you may have to lean more into the strengths and not focus on the weaknesses. So what's the balance? You know, is it based upon their personality or is it based upon the coach that they're working with? You know, because some people need to be pushed more on their weaknesses, right? Where some other people, you start calling out their weaknesses all the time, they're not going to be good with that because they're new to that. Right. So I don't want to say they're not coachable, but they haven't had the coaching experience to say somebody else that doesn't even want to hear about the strength. Like, if working with me, I don't want to hear about my fucking strengths. I know what that is. We want to fix all the other shit. That's a different personality. I don't even know if I say that. It's a more grown personality when it comes to balance of strengths and weaknesses.
Well, something we both, well, all our coaches ask our clients when they come in is, how do you want me to communicate with you when you have a positive win, when you achieve something? And how do you want us to communicate when you're falling short of your expectations of yourself?
Yeah, during our onboarding process, we have a questionnaire. It's 9 questions to support the coach-athlete relationship. It's a standardized form that we ask all of our clients, and that kind of helps us shape our communication. So coming back to,
so what are they? We'll have fun here.
Oh, my goodness. So
give me a few of them.
One of them is, how would you like me to communicate with you if you're doing a great job? We're paraphrasing.
All right, so let's take that one. Then I'll answer that.
Sure.
Right. I'm a type of person, if you tell me I'm doing a great job, it's not going to make any difference to me whatsoever.
Okay.
But that does not mean, you see what I'm saying?
Yep, for sure.
Because if I go this whole period of time, I'm like, what the fuck? So how do you balance that? Because
time.
Yeah,
for sure. So it comes down to time, and it comes down to,
see, I wouldn't even know how to answer that. You know what I'm saying? Like,
but if a person writes that down, that's very telling, right? If a person says, I don't know how to answer this. And then in the next one, it's, how would you like for me to communicate when you're not living up to the expectations that I have of you or you have of yourself?
I would like to be known. I would like it to be known.
Yes.
Okay. So keep going.
Next one is, if you weren't working with me, where do you think you would be?
Same place I've always been.
Where's some of them blanking? Oh my goodness. I can pull it up.
Yeah, pull it up real quick. This will be fun.
Okay.
So while he's pulling that up, after, say, post-show, where's your aspirations now?
Well, funny. At the end of that prep, I was like, I think I'm done. I have nothing left. I don't want to do this again. I've never felt so terrible before. But as you kind of recover from it and the dust settles, again, you're like, I could do it again. Right? So we want to settle down and start having kids. So I know after having kids, the possibility of me not coming back to the stage is definitely there.
Do you think being on the stage makes you a better coach?
A better coach? I think going through the process of a prep teaches me a lot that I can then transfer to my clients.
I'm not saying I'm not saying it's 100% necessary, right? Because that's one of the questions that gets thrown out there all the time.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's necessary to step on stage. I mean, unless you are coaching bodybuilding, I think you absolutely have to go through a prep and understand what it feels like and experience that if you're asking someone else to experience that. Because it's like nothing else.
Yeah.
But in terms of continuing to compete and to coach clients, no, I don't think it's necessary. I think it's very admirable to have a coach who chases their own dreams and aspirations and is working towards something. And that's something that I know that my clients really respect.
What about the prep
me.
though? Because while you're going through prep, and I guess this can be both for both of you, and times that I've dieted down. I mean, there's dieting, but then there's being really, really lean, and then dieting, and then the hunger signals are a whole different game.
So I knew coming into this prep what that is like and how it affects my focus, my ability to be a good coach. So about like 3 months out from competition, I stopped onboarding new clients because I knew my cap and what I would be able to handle when I'm feeling that rough and run down. So I stopped onboarding new clients during that time and just kind of kept my roster as is, and everyone was with me through the journey.
Well, the reason I'm asking that is those insane hunger signals. Say you're under 8% caliper body fat.
Right.
Maybe the same level of hunger symbols that somebody who's suffering from obesity is having, right? To where for many of us, we may not experience that same level of that hunger triggering until we're that lean to really be able to understand what they may be going through, kind of where GLP-1s, are coming. You get what I'm saying?
For sure.
But that's kind of like undefined because we're trying to define something that's, again, hard to define. But I've heard several people kind of relate that to, you take the bodybuilder, this competitive bodybuilder that gets to that point. Each time through, it gets a little bit easier, but it still gets to a point where all you think about is food. And that may be the same mental thought process that's happening with somebody that's 35% body fat, that's obese, that has that same. And I wonder, unless you've experienced all that, can you really relate, to that person that's suffering from that, but at a much higher body fat percentage? You get what I'm saying? Because that would be where I think we see some of the conflict between the fitness industry pushing it back against the science industry with the GLP-1s. Like, all they need is more discipline. But maybe that hunger signaling is the same as when it gets really fucking hard.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like being a pro bodybuilder. When I've had slip-ups and cheated on my diet, it wasn't because I'm not disciplined.
Yes.
I'm a pro. I have discipline.
Yes.
There's a lot more psychologically that's going on. And me being able to go through that, then I can relate to those clients who are struggling on that level so much more. Now,
some of those clients, though, because if we're speaking about discipline or work or whatever, they may be multimillionaires with several companies. So they have the discipline, right? But the hunger signaling is either they don't have the discipline for that, or it's a whole different chemical thing going on that we don't know.
Yeah. The word that jumps to mind for me when we're talking about all this is empathy, right? If you're going through the process, you develop empathy because you know what that feeling is like. That's why when you mentioned the word discipline, I was like, I don't know if I love that word, because people will say that, how you do one thing is how you do everything. It's bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
Like one of my good friends from childhood, one of the most disciplined dudes I've ever met, he took over his company from his dad and grew it 250%. The guy's 31 years old, worth $150 million. He's disciplined. Ask him to quit smoking. Ask him to not have a glass of scotch every night. But what this boils down to for me is empathy on the side of he doesn't understand his triggers. He doesn't understand how his mood influences his behavior. He's running at such a high clip that he has zero introspection in that moment. And for me, when we're talking about hunger cues, we're talking about behaviors, how that leads to binge eating or how that leads to even restriction in some people. It's a lack of an ability to stop. It's a lack of an ability to press pause, look within yourself, ask yourself how you're feeling in that moment, and then be able to make whatever decision you're going to make from a place of understanding versus a place of reactivity. So, we have a number of tools that we use with our clients. But one of the best ones that I have is like, hey, if you feel like you want to overeat and you feel like you can't stop eating, I want you to press start on a 10-minute clock on your phone. I want you to have a glass of water and I want you to wait. If after those 10 minutes you still want to eat, fire away. But I guarantee after that 10 minutes, you'll be more aware. You'll eat less if you decide to overeat. You may decide you don't want to eat. And even if you do, you're not going to be stressed or feel shame about it because you know why exactly you're going to make that decision.
Mm-hmm. You spent 10 minutes.
You spent 10 minutes thinking about it. That's my favorite cue. And it takes some time to learn that and to recognize how you're feeling, to be able to be like, oh, I'm having these feelings. I got to press start. That's okay. We're here for you.
Yeah.
That's where the empathy comes in.
Let's jump back to the question.
Yeah, sure. So I pulled this up. The first one is, what are the 5 most important ways I can best support you as a coach? The next one is,
do you want to answer?
Well, I'm thinking, right?
It's going to be different for everybody.
Yeah.
Right? The next question is, how would you define success within our work together? So some people will make that a process-oriented answer.
Yeah, that's where I would go, is I would think, okay, we need to set up metrics to be able to track where it's going.
Some people will be purely outcome-based. I want to lose 10 pounds.
And that's an important one, to make sure that they know what's required to get to that level of success.
Yep.
Yeah.
All of these questions, the answer tells you so much more than just the answer.
Yeah, because I was going to say, with that outcome based, I mean, that made me pause and take a deep breath, right? Because it's like, ooh, that's a tricky one, because there's no guarantee the outcome could be there.
Right. If we weren't working together, what would you feel would be your trajectory? So we asked that one already. What do you think would be the most powerful or impactful thing I could help with during our work together? What do you feel would constitute poor coaching on my part? How should I communicate with you if you fall behind in the pursuit of your goals or fall short on my expectations of you? How should I communicate with you if you're successful in achieving a milestone? What sort of accountability would you like me to provide? Are you ready to be the best version of yourself?
All right, so with the accountability, what kind of accountability would you provide?
Usually that comes down to frequency of communication.
Yeah.
Right. It comes down to so we use a coaching app to work with our clients. So that allows us to automate messages and reminders. It allows them to track different metrics. It allows them to track different adherence on habits. So regardless of the level of accountability you want, you can have as much accountability or as little. Like, I have some clients where all that's in the app is their workouts. I have some clients who have macros, lessons every day, a meal plan, activities that they track, metrics that they track, their wearables, questionnaires, tons of it, all along the gamut. And what you'll notice, and what I notice a lot of, is some of the people who say they need the least amount of accountability need the most.
That's what I would think.
Yeah. And
and it could be because they just don't know.
That's part of it. And I think a lot of it too is this is something you deal with more and more as a coach, as you move on in your career, people think they need to be something to almost prove themselves to you. So they try to like be tougher, or they try to be more disciplined, or they withhold their vulnerability because they think it'll make you feel like
more proud of them.
Yeah, it'll make you feel more proud of them. I deal with it as I get older, and I work with younger clients as well. They want to make me proud. We joke about it, but they call Liv and I mom and dad.
Mm-hmm.
But that's telling, right? If we're reading between the lines of what these words actually mean, that means they want to make us proud. But that's a slippery slope, because if you want to make us proud and you think that being vulnerable is going to make us feel bad and we're going to make us angry, well, then you're not going to show that vulnerability. But it can also be a powerful motivator of, in that moment where you're feeling those hunger cues, I can't do this for coach. I can't cheat on my diet because coach. That's great acutely, because it stopped you from doing what you're supposed to do. But unless you communicate, hey, Paul or Liv, I really wanted to cheat on my diet on Saturday, but I didn't because I thought of how it would make you feel. That communication of vulnerability allows us as coaches to be like, hey, I'm glad you made the decision not to overeat that night, but let's dive into why. Because you're not doing this for me, you're doing this for you.
And also when we're not here,
Mm-hmm.
what's going to happen at that point?
Yep. Yep.
So then how do you, because you work with coaches,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you're on both ends of that spectrum.
Yep.
Right? To where you're going to see red flags in other coaches' game, behavior,
For sure.
business, or whatnot. How do you mentally deal with that as you're working with whoever you're working with?
I'm I wouldn't say black and white, but I'll push back. I'll push back on you pretty hard, and I'll point out those times and, hey, like, this is what you're asking of other people. You better damn well live up to that yourself. And it's something I hold very, very strongly for myself and for the coaches that work with our company. And I know Liv holds herself to that standard as well. If you look at, it was conceptualized by actually one of Olivia's clients, who's a brand strategist. She told us that our company essentially serves people along a spectrum, where you'll have that person who's just coming in who has no experience, and then you have all of our coaches on the other end, either, world record, like Jaden's an IFBB pro, Liv's an IFBB pro, I've been a Canadian record holder, Liv's been a Canadian record holder. We have physiotherapists, nutrition coaches who work with thousands of clients. Like, we're all on that other end of the spectrum. So wherever that person comes in there, we have to be able to serve them. But that's going to demand a different approach on our part. So the way in which we communicate to them, the way in which we approach is going to be different. But vulnerability is across the spectrum. Everybody needs to have that vulnerability. So when we're talking about coaches, you have to be on the far end of that spectrum. You have to represent yourself to that end. Because if you don't, and you fall back to the middle, and you're not honest about it, you get what we're seeing right now in the bodybuilding space, where coaches are being called out for their poor business practices or their poor service of their clients, or all of these other things that are very front and center in the industry right now. I'm just using it because it's top of mind, but you have to be the standard. So when I'm working with other coaches, I'm very quick to remind them, hey, are you the standard right now? No, you're not. Luckily, again, I do a great job of vetting the people that I work with, and I know that they're going to respond positively to that. And some people I can come out and say, hey, you're fucking up right now. Other people I have to bring it, be like, hey, what would you do if your client did the same thing? And they'd be like, oh, well, yeah, I wouldn't feel great about that. And so the outcome of that conversation is the same. I'm still pushing back, but it's the way I push back.
Well, how does that change if it's on that far end of the spectrum and they're still competitors and they're chasing what's probably their first priority, mm-hmm. which would be whatever they're competing in, so then their clients and their business essentially is the second priority,
I'm probably not going to get along very well with that client. Yeah. I'm probably not going to get along very well with that coach, because to me, we are servants. Like, in the grand scheme, we are servants to the people that we work with. And I don't mean like we're slaves or whatever, because we get compensated very well. But our primary goal is to support the people that we work with. And that's why Olivia didn't onboard any clients. She could have easily added clients. She was posting more content. She was doing more public facing stuff. She was getting more inquiries, but she didn't, because that service level never can drop. And that's a commitment that you make. So if your primary goal is training and primary goal is competing and coaching comes secondary to that, and you're allowing that primary goal to ditch the service that you're providing to your people, I'm probably not going to want to work with you.
Well, that's the different levels of coaching we see across all these industries.
Yes.
Because a lot of them are only doing it to be able to pay, for their ability to be able to compete.
Yeah.
I would say the majority.
I would as well. I would agree with you.
Because as soon as they stop competing, they're probably not going to be coaches anymore. They're going to just kind of go on to something else.
Yeah.
But that's what the customer avatar has to filter through.
Absolutely.
As they're going through. And that's where some of this has become just a giant clusterfuck, over the years, because the ones with the highest digital footprint are probably not the best coaches.
I'm not going to generalize and say that most of them aren't. I know a lot of people with massive followings that are phenomenal coaches. But I would look to, as a client, what are you looking for in a coach? And I use the word coach very, very specifically, because to me, a coach is more than just someone who writes a plan. It's your guide along a journey, right? And this is your journey. You're the hero. So if you're the hero and I'm the guide, we have this video that we send all our clients, and I mentioned, Michael Jordan had Phil Jackson. They say, hey, listen, Po from Kung Fu Panda had Master Oogway. It's Kung Fu Panda, not Master Oogway's movie, right? So if you're the star of the movie, I'm just there guiding your way. So whatever you need in order to be supported, you need to ask for that from that guide. And if you're not getting what you need, then that's not the coach for you.
But they may not know.
Bingo.
Welcome to Master Athletic Performance, where we are raising the bar for online coaching. With our client-centered approach, whether you're looking to set PRs in the gym, step on stage, or you're pursuing the highest level of excellence for yourself, our coaches are committed to getting you the results that you're after and teach you the habits and structure to maintain it for the long term. With decades of experience, having coached over 10,000 clients, our MAP coaches provide online coaching for nutrition and training. We're here to give you the roadmap for success. We communicate, educate, and empathize. We show you that you're capable of massive changes through small steps. Let us help you in your pursuit for personal progression.
So what we're indirectly talking about is the question I asked earlier is, do you have to compete to be a coach? Right? Because this is kind of going full circle, with all of that.
I think there's a few ways that people will go about it now. So you have let's just use social media as an example. So you have the people that are putting out valuable posts. They're trying to talk to their avatar. They might not have a huge audience. But then you have the people with huge audiences that probably are high-level competitors or do something really great with social media, that they got visibility and they got this footprint. That doesn't necessarily make them a great coach if they're not adding value for the people. But what's ended up happening in social media is you'll have these stitched reels where it's like reaction type videos. So you can pull someone else's audience from a big channel in and then talk shit about them to try to do it. And it's one thing that we'll never do, because in my opinion, it's not ethical to talk negatively about people. We'll attack ideas, but not people. And we won't bring their names into it or put them on our platform. But if you continue to do the things you're doing at a high enough frequency, good information will always trump bad information over time, and you will outlast, right? Like, using myself as an example, I have like 8,700 followers. I don't have a lot of followers. I know that. Olivia has 27,000, 20, something like that. But I know a lot of coaches who have less than 2,000 followers who are making over $100,000 a month providing an amazing service.
Well, followers is interesting, right?
Yeah.
So, and I've told this story before. Imagine if you're a coach, in the industry, and you're asked to speak at a high school, 45 minutes on a high school class about health and nutrition. You're probably going to prepare pretty well, and you're going to be like, oh my God, or what if it's a college, right? And it's 50, 75, like, holy shit, I get to speak in front of 75 people. Now, what if what you're speaking about is really dialed in, and you have people in that audience that could be potential clients? You're probably going to get a few. All right. So now let's say you're going to speak at a basketball game with 5,000 people, right? So now there's more people. How much more are you going to prepare? You're going to prepare more, or you're going to prepare less? Because now you're not going to be talking for 45 minutes. It's going to be 3 minutes? Something like that. So you're going to have to truncate whatever your message is and then be able to put it out there, and how many potential clients are in there. Probably more, but how many are going to actually know who you are, know what you stand for? Very little. So now let's take it to, the horseshoe here at Ohio State, and it's 100,000 people, right? You're probably going to get a little bit less time and be able to get out there. So the larger the audience, the more diluted your message can actually become. All right, now let's couple that with what is a full client load? For most people, 20 to 40?
Yeah, so that's a question in and of itself. To me, it's like the quality of service you want to provide. And for most people, that 40 to 50 client, if you're very invested and putting in the time, that's a full client load.
Okay, so now if it's 40 to 50, and let's say you only have 400 followers, but they're real followers, they're people that really care about what you have to say. What percentage? 10% is 40 of that. Now let's say it's 400,000 followers, which is going to have the greater impact.
Of course.
So the greater impacts actually I would see as being the lower number of followers that actually want to hear what you have to say.
Yep.
So people will get disillusioned of, well, I only have 2,000 followers. Like, dude, if that was 2,000 followers, and you got to speak in that same college every week with people that can afford to pay. So I got to put that in there.
Right.
Or at least half that can afford to pay. Every week for that whole semester, how many of those people are going to remember who you are? You're going to make an imprint on them, and they're going to learn something from you.
Those 2,000 people are probably, they know you personally. They know you on a deeper level.
Yes. And so you have a higher probability of converting the smaller number than you do of converting the larger number.
The catalyst in all of this that I am realizing over time is frequency. Most people who come to me have an aversion to posting on social media. That's actually probably one of the number one barriers that the coaches who come to work with me have. It's, I hate social media. I don't want to post. And I say, okay, enjoy being broke. Because that's the only way that you're going to get free marketing to people to get to know who you are, what you do, who you help, and what you stand for. And when I put it like that, they're, okay, if I want to be online, I have to have an online footprint. Where do I start? My answer is just start. Start posting your own training. Start posting the things that you're doing. Start posting, your day-to-day, what that means. Soon you will start to get a couple clients. Yes, there's other things you could be doing outside of that with, public appearances, email marketing, stuff like that. And we can go down the rabbit hole if you'd like. But with just that, you said, if I can speak once a week to that high school, what if I could speak 3 times a day to that high school, or 4 times a day, or 7 times a day? Wouldn't that high school be kind of just over the moon excited that I'm giving them that much time and energy?
Well, the example I would make of that would be their coach.
Boom. Boom. That's exactly it. So, you have so many opportunities with social media. You have Instagram stories, you have Instagram posts, you have Instagram live, you have Facebook live, you have Facebook posts, you have TikTok, YouTube shorts, YouTube videos, podcasts, articles. Then you get into building an email list and have a newsletter, and there's so many opportunities to interact with people. The stat that I always come back to is, for anyone to click on an ad, they need to see it about 7 to 10 times. My thought with coaching is, in order for someone to reach out to a coach, that number is probably closer to 100, because a coaching relationship is so much more intimate, and you're trusting a much more than just Like I bought one of the, you ever seen those back shavers, those circular back shavers? I just got one of those because I was like, oh, this looks cool. So I saw it a couple times and I clicked on it. I'm not doing that for a coach. I need to know exactly who that person is. I need to know what they know, who they've helped, how they help, what they stand for, all of these things. You can't do that in 7 to 10. But what if I took that 100 touches and I put that into 10 opportunities a day for 10 days? Now, that one person, because of the algorithm, isn't going to see all 10 of those. So let's maybe triple that, say 60 days. You make 10 reach outs a day for 60 days. You're telling me you're not going to close clients?
Well, there's the other side of this too, where with our side over the years, it's had to change on how we kind of put people out there. But you wanted to put them out there to be able to show they walk the walk, they talk the talk. They do the trade, they live the trade, and then they can also coach the trade. So that you got to show that you know what you're doing.
Absolutely.
That you live the life, and that you care. So all three of those got to be in there. But the missing component, I think a lot of them think, is if somebody's going to hire a coach or invest in a business mentor or whatever it's going to be, maybe they come on your radar with that reel or that short or whatever it is. But before they actually make any real decision, they're going to go through all the past ones, right? So even if they don't get a lot of views, right, those past ones, nobody's going to hire a coach off just that. They're going to start vetting. Like, hey, I'm interested in working with you. Cool. I'm going to look at all your Instagram stuff, right? That gives me an idea, but not a good enough anchor. I need to listen to something else. That's where like a podcast or something like, who is this person? Right. Where can I go a little bit deeper into that? And then if they have a website, that I'd be able to have their bio, testimonials, and all that. This is trifecta that kind of has to play out there. Now with, large language models and GPTs, you got to make sure that your site, if I was to go search, and I do this to vet people on the podcast, if it was Paul Oneid, what's going to come up through the GPT? What's that crawling? Well, it's not crawling Instagram yet. It's not crawling YouTube yet. But it is crawling blog posts, it's crawling the website, it's crawling all that stuff in there. Because slowly over a period of time, people will begin to stop searching Google and start searching GPTs.
I've already started to.
Yeah, I've been doing it for a long time, right? Yeah. So I'm speculating, but I actually do it. So so that's going to happen as well, and that's going to allow those deeper dives. But until the podcast and all these other things start to be transcribed and pulled into GPTs, which probably will at some price sooner than we think, then, that has to be covered somewhere.
Absolutely.
Right? Because the coach relationship is over a period of a year, it's a bigger investment than what I think coaches even think that they're actually asking for, because most don't look at lifetime value. It's like, hey, I'm going to get X for a month.
Huge mistake, though.
It is a huge mistake, right? So go into that so they can understand that.
Okay. So one of the most important metrics that you can look at as a coach on your success and on your ability to grow your business is customer lifetime value, which is essentially the monthly fee that you charge extended over the average lifespan of a client. So your retention rate over any number of months. So for us, and this is something that I do all the time, so I'm not uncomfortable sharing. So for us as a company, including all the clients that come in, do their 3 months and leave, because we have a 3-month minimum, our average retention is just shy of a year. That's pretty significant, because when you look at it, if Olivia is charging $400 a month and she's keeping her clients for, let's say, a year to balance it off, that's $4,800 per client.
Yes.
If you're working with, let's say, 50 grand and you're working with 40 clients at a time, that's a lot of money.
Yes.
That's $200,000 off of 50 clients.
Yeah. The only thing I would add to that they should be aware of is what the CAC is. And that would be what the actual profit of that is, because that will help to determine your ad spend, and your marketing spend.
Right.
Because some people will just go off that lifetime value, right?
Yeah. So, but most coaches are not spending money on ads.
Yeah.
Especially.
Well, it's time. You know what I'm saying?
Time. Yeah. There's an opportunity cost associated with what you're doing. But so when you look at it in terms of, okay, my website costs X amount per year and my time for doing internet, whatever, even at 50 clients a month, if you have good systems in place like we do, we can coach each client sub 90 minutes a month. So if you take 50 times 90 minutes, that's 75 minutes per month per client times 50 clients. You're still working 15 hours a week-ish on client work. You're telling me that's a full-time job? What I would say is double that. And that's probably what you're spending on all of your business in terms of Instagram posting, blog posting, writing, all the business related stuff. Is probably for every hour you're coaching, you're doing an hour of that. And that's why I use that 40 to 50 range, because most people are around, 90 minutes to 2 hours, sometimes 2 hours plus if they have poor systems or processes and they have bad communication strategies, which is a lot of what we go into with my mentorship. Now you start to build this robust idea of how much you actually make an hour. And then from there, you can kind of work backwards to say, if I want to make this much per hour, I have to coach this many clients to make this much money per year. And a lot of the people that come to me, they're still working full-time jobs. They want to quit their jobs, go into coaching full-time. It's like, oh, what's your magic number? What's the magic amount of income per month averaged out over 3 months that you can make in order to be able to be comfortable quitting your job? Okay, let's go chase that. How do we do that? What's the action plan? And that piece of lifetime value, like the best way to build a business is to never lose clients. If I only add 1 or 2 clients a month, I don't care because I don't lose any. So my roster is always growing. And if I add 12 clients over a year and I only lose 2, I just grew my roster by 10 people. Yes. And 10 people at $400 and each one is $5,000. I just made $50,000 more this year than I did last. I'm actually really impressed at my math skills. Really good. I was on it. That was good.
So with everything that he's talking about, when you met, were you running systems like this?
When we met, I was working for another company, Hybrid Performance. I'm sure most people know who they are. So I was nutrition coaching with them. And with them, the systems were very, I guess like quick turnover, not a lot of retention. Anyways, I was well over 100 clients. So at that amount of clients, you can't get that like personal connection with each one. Like I'd have someone, I'm like, I don't even remember what I said to you last week, So when we started talking and about growing Master Athletic, I wanted to go off on my own. I wanted to start doing things my own way. I wanted to be the coach that I needed years ago. So I decided to leave and join Paul, and that was the start of Master Athletic. And having that cap of clients to be able to have that close connection, to know when their birthdays are, to know what their partner's name is, to know where they went on vacation last week, right? That was super important to me as a coach.
Yeah. So Liv came on with me about just shy of a year into our relationship. So, we started dating in June, and then the next May, she decided to join up with me. Going from working with 100 clients at a time to, I think you left with 7. 7 to 10.
10 to 15-ish.
Yeah, okay. So from 10 to 15, and then within 6 months, she's back up to like 45, 50. And that was done purely based on exactly what we spoke about before, speaking to the people that she wanted to speak to, and then also having a large audience and sharing her own journey and the things that she represents, and doing all the things that we espouse within my mentorship program. And so I saw it firsthand what could be possible. And what was cool for me was, so when Liv came on, it was just the 2 of us. Within 6 months, we had hired 4 other coaches. And then from there, we had a bit of a turnover, and now we're up to 7 coaches. I had just started my mentorship program when she came on, and I've had over 40 people go through that mentorship program now. So the company as a whole has grown like crazy. And then through all that, I've also still had Coach's Corner University, which I started with Tony Montgomery, and I've since continued on my own, doing the continuing education lectures once a month, the podcast, and then a couple of courses that we sell as well. Plus I moved the mentorship from Master Athletic over to Coach's Corner to kind of segregate things a little bit. It's been amazing. And the catalyst was Liv right here.
I was going to say, how does that work as a couple trying to grow this? You know, because going back to you're living together, you're working together, you know, training together, it's always right there.
Yeah.
Right. So when you're dealing with company dynamics and growing a company, how have you balanced that?
I think on the shareholders agreement, I'm the CEO, she's the president. But Liv actually had this hilarious line. Someone asked us in one of the, you know, those Instagram Q&As.
Yeah.
Someone's like, who wears the pants in your relationship? And she said, Paul wears the pants, but I do the laundry. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly how we run our business. I would consider myself the CEO in terms of I put together the plans. I have, you know, the forecasting and kind of what we want to do, but I will always vet it through her and make sure, because I'm very much like a vision oriented person in terms of like I want to see into the future, but Liv is much more practical in the moment, and she can kind of pull me back and say, hey, we're not really ready for that, or these are the things that we need to do, or hey, do we really need to spend money on this? It could be better used for the X, Y, and Z. That from the business operations, that's how it goes. From a practical standpoint of us being husband and wife, we don't talk about business after 8:30 at night. We go on a walk every night and kind of touch base on our day. But once we get back inside, no more talk about business. Usually it's me. So whenever I start talking about something and she doesn't want to talk about it, she'll be like, nope. So just shut it down. So there is clear delineation of when we are husband and wife and when we are business partners. And we also make sure that we take the time to connect with one another in ways like when we go on vacation, we don't talk about work. When we,
but sometimes that's when the best ideas will come.
I write them down and we talk about it later.
That's what I was going to ask that, right? Yeah. Because that will happen with my wife and I.
Yeah, for sure.
I'll bring something up, it gets shut down. I'm like, fuck. But we can get this done right now.
Yeah.
You know, if we do this right now. So if you're to scale, and this is kind of one of the projects I had to do early on, if you were to scale the business to be 1,000 times bigger, right? You would have operation statements for all these different positions: CTO, COO, CEO, you know, marketing manager, So you have all these different position statements, and then they get divided amongst, you know, the both of you or whoever else you have working. You don't want overlap. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? So it's so at a certain period of time, I remember when Wendler was here, it was like 4 different jobs that he had, right? You know, the sales was one and content management was another. And we got to a point where, you know, it had to separate. We needed somebody to take over one of those two. But by that, it doesn't mean, you know, that person we bring in just gets all the shit, you know, from both of those that say he wouldn't want to do. Mm-hmm. It's like that whole position has to move. Yep. You know, so which one are you most interested in? Mm-hmm. You know, and then we'll make the decision that way. So with that, how do you avoid, because we all wear many hats.
Yes.
Right. How do you avoid you both not wearing the same hat?
Well, when we first started bringing other coaches onto the team, I was very clear that I didn't want to be the leader. I wanted to coach my clients. I wanted to be part of a team. I didn't necessarily want to lead them. So a lot of like growing the business, the things behind the scenes, Paul was going to take over. But I have a very good understanding of reading him when his stress level starts to get a little bit high.
You get the knife hands?
He gets the knife hands going. And that's when I'm like, hey, give me something to do. Let me take something off of your plate and I can do that. And then that's my job kind of going forward.
Yeah, there's an element of trust there too. So when we have that conversation of, actually, this just happened recently. We had a team meeting and there was a number of things that were proposed and I thought were great ideas. So I'm a very collaborative leader. I always ask for our team's input because I don't want to be a team that there's a lot of churn. I don't want our team to change. I want everyone to be super happy and to be working with us. I know that's not necessarily realistic long term, but maybe I'm an optimist. So we had a team meeting and there was a few projects proposed. And after the call, Liv and I sat down. I was like, I can't do this. I need your help. It was the first time where it wasn't reactive on her part to pull something from me. It was proactive of me to say, hey, I need your help. And I think as we continue to grow, we're going to continue to have those conversations. And maybe the conversation is, hey, I can't do this. Oh, I can't do this either. Let's bring somebody else on.
Yeah.
And I've been proactive in the sense of creating those SOPs, making sure that for every process that we do, it has an itemized list of steps that we need to take, and starting to formalize the processes of our business behind the scenes. Like the process of our business in serving clients has already been standardized for a long time in terms of quality of service, but the back end stuff needs to be standardized as well. So I'm working on that behind the scenes. But it's very much been, if Liv says she's going to take something off the plate, it's hers. And I forget the exact stages of management. There's like 1 is like you're a complete control freak, and 6, you're completely hands off. With Liv, I'm a 6. If she says she's doing it, it's hers. That's fine. Most other people, if I hire somebody, I'm probably a 5, because I'm giving it to you to do. I vetted you. You say you can do it, do it. And I know that those category 5 leaders get burned a little bit, and I'm totally okay with it, because in the short term, it's going to be a lot easier for me. And I think that's just how it's going to go. It's going to be like, hey, we want to do this. What are the infrastructure that we need in order to make this happen? Can we take care of it ourselves? I mentioned the brand strategist earlier. That's the next step that we're going to do. So we're going to hire somebody to do that. It's our first opportunity to outsource a part of our business, and we're going to experiment with it and see how it goes. It's going to be a massive financial investment, but it's totally going to be worth it long term for what our goals are. And I'm pretty sure it's going to be Liv's opportunity, and I'm telling her right now, I don't think she knows that yet. It's going to be her responsibility to coordinate with that person.
How do you build your culture throughout all this?
As a team, I think frequent touch points with our coaches. We're meeting bi-weekly with all of our coaches on a group call to talk about, what we're doing, how that aligns with their values. Because ultimately, yes, we are all master athletic performance, but each coach serves their clients in the way that they want to be coaching. I'm totally okay with that.
You mentioned something earlier about your relationship with food, so can you go a little bit deeper into that? So what was it before bodybuilding? And then how are you dealing with that post bodybuilding?
Before getting into bodybuilding, there was a lot of that diet culture that I feel a lot of women will struggle with, good and bad food, going all in, all out, constantly needing to be in a calorie deficit, constantly needing to be a lower body weight. And that was something that I was always struggling with. Like, I never gave myself the opportunity to actually eat enough food that I actually needed, eat enough food to fuel performance, to look at food in that other light, and being able to get into a competitive sport, so Olympic weightlifting. I know I needed to start fueling performance. I know I needed to eat to train harder, and that shifting my mindset into that goal and going all in with that allowed me to start to heal that relationship with food. And then, I felt great going into that first bodybuilding show, but throughout the prep and then after, all of those tendencies start to kind of come back, right? That yo-yo dieting, the binging, because you go from one extreme to the other after going through a prep and being a very low body fat percentage to gaining some weight back, which is healthy, but in the moment it feels like a lot. So a lot of those tendencies started to come back. But through my own teaching of myself and learning the triggers for that, being able to, like Paul said, stop and reflect and do that introspective work to understand why I was engaging in these behaviors, that's what really started to do the work. And that's really what I help women do now.
What were some of the other things that, I guess for both of you, that the things that you've took from high level performance to be able to integrate into the business and basically just your life? In other words, I've always said everything we need to know we can learn in the gym, with the exception of maybe teamwork. But, because there is that, right? Yeah. Because there's a difference between a small crew, and working with, 15 people or 20 people or whatever. So what are some of those other things?
That I've helped women,
things from performance and training at a high level that have carried over, you know, to business / life. Yeah. Or just life in general.
Yeah.
Because isn't that why we're kind of working, or you're working with clients?
Absolutely.
Right? Yes, there is that goal, but overreaching is to have a better quality of life.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the people that come to me struggle with that relationship with food, struggle with not allowing themselves to understand themselves on a deeper level. So I think me being able to do that myself. Help me out here.
Yeah, I think from the high performance element, we mentioned before the empathy piece, right? Being able to go to those dark places within yourself and come out the other side, being a better version. And I think we become the best versions of ourselves through hardship. And training and dieting, whether it be like to gain muscle, to lose fat, to perform at a high level, these are all manufactured hardships. And the thing that has always stuck with me, and the reason I got into coaching in the first place, is because I wouldn't be where I am without training or the gym, right? I wouldn't, for me personally, I never would have gone to university. I never would have gone to grad school. I never would have become a strength coach. I never would have become a coach and built my own business. I wouldn't have had all, and this, there's a lot of other things we could go into with this. Like, I wouldn't have some of the closest relationships that I have without a barbell, without the lessons I learned from a barbell. So ultimately, me pushing myself to the levels that I did has allowed me to learn these lessons and then show people how to do the same, how to elevate themselves. And the tagline for our business, raising the bar, it extends from raising the bar in the gym, lifting it off the floor or putting it on your back and standing up, to raising the bar as a parent, raising the bar as a professional, raising the bar for yourself and your own personal journey. And for me, that's paramount to everything that we do. So when I mentioned that spectrum, we're on that right-hand side, that far end. We're always raising the bar for ourselves so that we can raise the bar for other people and help them do the same.
Where do you see the disconnect between, you've been around for a while, right? I don't put your age out there, but you've been around for a long time, right? And
37.
We've seen people who were phenomenal strength athletes, you know, phenomenal bodybuilders, just phenomenal in the gym, but then not be able to take those qualities and be able to apply it, you know, to their life or business. What do you think is the disconnect with them not being able to realize that these same values, abilities, and qualities that they develop can be applied in other areas?
I think maybe people who are using training or a bodybuilding prep or whatever it is as a means to suppress whatever it is that they're feeling or whatever it is that they're dealing with.
Yeah, it took the words out of my mouth for sure.
Elaborate more.
So,
I could use myself as an example here for sure. So like,
example.
if I had this injury 5 years ago, I'd be fucked. Mentally, emotionally, completely fucked, because my entire identity was tied into powerlifting.
Would you be though? Or would you have just found a way to be able to come back as fast as you can, because you would take those emotions and make them all aggression?
Yeah, but I would have probably done more damage.
Of course. Yeah. But I'm sure you had injuries before.
Oh,
not as bad.
No.
But they were approached differently.
Yeah, much differently. And actually, I don't know if I approached them differently from a practical standpoint, but from a mental standpoint, for sure.
Yes.
And I think the people that can't translate the lessons that they learn in the gym outside of their lives is because I don't think they actually learn those lessons. I think they're using training, as Liv said, as a means to mask some sort of insecurity or some sort of emotional, whatever, trauma, whatever you want to call it, through pain in the barbell to just, and they end up by proxy achieving this greatness because of whatever genetic predisposition and work ethic that they have. They don't actually learn the lessons that
they don't learn them, but they practice them.
Right. But without the awareness to know what you're doing, you can't translate. And it's that awareness piece. And it took me a really long time to learn that personally.
Yeah.
And it took me having to step away to learn that. I've stepped away a number of times for a year at a time, or, you know, this past 2.5 years at a time, to kind of relearn myself and how the barbell fits into my life. And so with this injury, it's like, yeah, I know exactly where the barbell fits into my life now. I know exactly who I am as a person. And if you asked me, okay, here's a question for you. If you had to define yourself as a person, like who is Dave Tate, but you can't use your job, your family, or your hobbies, who are you? That's hard, right?
Yeah.
That was something that was on my mind the entire time we were at the hospital. It was something that I was asked in passing a few months prior, and it was something on my mind the entire time I was in the hospital. I was like, who am I?
Well, if I'm to be honest, I would give a spiritual answer.
Which is totally fine.
Which is, how I would, the first thing that came to my head,
Yep.
Is, I'm just a vessel,
Okay.
Of God,
Yeah.
And that's where everything will be reduced
Yep.
to, if I was to keep, because after pondering that, you keep digging deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. Then where do you end up? You end up with, well, either I'm just this organism like a cat, just walking around waiting to die.
Big fucking cat.
Or I'm put here for some reason, which I don't fully understand.
Right.
So I just give that up,
Yep.
To where that is. Because it's a tough question.
Yeah. I would have answered 5 years ago, I'm a coach and powerlifter. That'd been the end of the answer. I wouldn't have thought any deeper. And I've been through a number of things over the last 5 years that have completely reshaped who I am and how I look at myself and my place in the world. And to that end, I am someone who serves others, does hard things, brings other people up through my own experiences. And that extends beyond my occupation. I try to do that in every aspect of my life. I try to do that with my family, with my work, with all these things. But that is core to my identity, is this drive to use my experiences to improve the world. And I'm someone who endures. So I wrote a number of, if anyone follows me on Instagram, as I was going through my recovery, I shared a reflection every day. And one of the first things that I wrote, it was the day I found out about my injury. I said, I'm someone who I identify as someone who does hard things. It's time for me to prove that. And so through this whole process it's been me proving to myself that I am who I say I am. And so when you can do that, all of the external things like the powerlifting, the bodybuilding, all that stuff, those are your mediums to proliferate the message that you have for the world. And I don't know ultimately what my message is going to be. I'm not a religious person, so I don't necessarily relate to that, but I understand it. But for me, it comes down to, I need to continue to ask myself that question, and I need to continue to introspect on that, and I need to continue to dig deeper. And maybe that ends up as, we're all just stardust.
Well, the roles, I mean, it's kind of a trick question, right? Because roles we serve, is, I can't separate me being a husband and a father. Mm-hmm. Those roles we serve are our ability to express the values that we want to express.
But some people have those roles and don't associate any of themselves to it. There's a ton of piece of shit dads.
Yeah.
There's a ton of dudes who have jobs and don't give a fuck about what they do. There's a lot of powerlifters that are phenomenal powerlifters but have no idea why and can't translate that outward. So for me, it comes down to why. Why do you do these things? Why are you so driven to be a father? Why are you so driven to make an impact in the industry? Why are you so driven to show up for everyone around you? That's who you are. That why is so, so, so core to you as a person. And obviously I've been to a lot of therapy by the way that I'm talking, but it's like that is everything to me in understanding the why. As simple as like, if you wanted to buy Tracy flowers, are you buying her flowers because giving her flowers makes you feel happy? Or are you giving her flowers because you want to see her smile so that she feels happy? And those could be tied together because making her happy makes you happy. Mm-hmm. But what if making her happy makes you feel happy because you feel sad right now and you want to feel happy? Are you just giving her flowers so that you feel better?
Yeah.
Again, I live in my head. These are the questions that I ask. And like, I think this stuff is so, so important to just reflect on because it feeds into everything else that we do.
No, but it plays back to the original question of if they're practicing the principles, in one area, say the gym, and in understanding, you know, really what's going on, right? Because if we're to think of your peak at the gym, you know, when prepping for a pro show, you're at the height of whatever it is. And if you really think back, most the sets that you did weren't great. You know, you didn't enjoy all the sets. You know, you can just think back and how many of them do you really remember? You know, there's certain benchmark things that you're going to remember, but most of what you did to be able to get on the platform or the stage, you didn't really enjoy. You know, it was just part of the process. Now there's a net positive in that overall process, but that may be a net positive of only one. You know, you got to think a lot to know it's a net positive 1 or 100 or whatever it is. When you look at work, or you look at most of the things that we all have to do in life, most of them we really don't want to do, right? We're not excited to do. And how is that really any different than all the training that we've done before? You see what I'm saying? So I think part of that disconnect is most definitely what you said. You know, not digging into figuring out why, but then also not understanding that most of it really you didn't like either.
Yeah, and even playing a little bit further into that, and I've heard you say this before too, it's like, what do you do when it starts to suck?
Sometimes that's when you dig in more because you like it more.
Yeah, when it starts to suck, you like it more. And it's fucking weird, man.
Yes. Right. And business can be that way as well.
Yeah.
You know, to where things are going too well, you purposely do something to kind of self-destruct just to have a problem to be able to solve. Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that becomes another complex mind fuck to be able to figure that whole thing out as well. But it already all happened through decades in the gym, you know, and when you can start to correlate those, then sometimes that's where those answers can be found. Like, what do you do in the gym if you get stuck on your chest? Well, spotters got to help pull it off. Well, no shit. Well, what if you get stuck in business, or you get stuck, you know, in a relationship or whatever it is? Are you asking for spotters, or are you just sitting there straining under the fucking bar?
Well, you roll it down your chest and then you make an ass out of yourself in the gym like we all have.
Yeah, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right? And when there's momentum, what do? You ride the momentum, right? That's what we're all looking for in the gym. If you're prepping for something, it's to ride the momentum. So if you have it someplace else, do you ride it or do you destruct it? Right? So it's all these things, and when thought through, and I think that's kind of where we're getting to, is when people talk about the process, you know, you got to enjoy the process. I get that. I understand all that, but that's a very broad concept because there's a lot of shit that goes on in that process.
That's not enjoyable.
That's not enjoyable, but really needs to be pondered and thought about because that's where the real application comes. Yeah. Because
I think you have to find meaning in the process.
Yeah. I mean, having those very hard sessions, days, whatever it is, and finding, like, going back to, well, why am I doing this? This day sucks. This training session sucks. But I'm doing this because my why is because I love that ability to endure. I love getting through that prep, getting through that hard day, getting through that session, and being like, I just proved something to myself.
Well, you love the back end of the ability to endure. You're not that far off of being in the actual shit. Right?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of like, everybody will all speak about the overcoming adversity and all that other stuff, but I think we don't speak enough about how bad the adversity actually does suck.
Oh, right. My God. Like, I wrote this in one of my reflections. I was like, yeah, my situation sucks. It super sucks, but it's just part of this process of me doing hard things is gonna suck, and I accept that it's gonna suck. And, you know, I talk about meaning in terms of if I know that the process that I'm going through is personally meaningful, then I'll endure anything.
Yeah, but sometimes you don't know that.
That's one thing. That's one area of my life where I have decided to take the time to figure out what that meaning is so that I do know it, and then that makes it much easier. Right. So I kind of.
So how do you get to that point?
Therapy, a lot of therapy.
So then with that, because I mean, that's another general answer. What were some of the light bulb moments through therapy that you had that made you stop and think, oh shit, maybe I do need to think about that one thing?
So one of the things that I think I was very blind to, and I think that this will resonate with a lot of people, is I never really I would engage in all these activities, whether it be powerlifting or, you know, performance enhancing stuff and like all the potentially negative, harmful things that I was doing in order to get to this PR. And I would do it without actually knowing what that PR meant to me, only that it was a PR. And so through therapy, and this is just one example in one area of my life where I was able to say, like, okay, what does that PR actually mean to me? Are these practices necessary? Are they making me a better version of myself? Are they pulling me away from my values? What are my values? What are my priorities? Like, I'm essentially living blind in pursuit of this thing. I don't even know what that thing is. And I'm engaging in actions that may or may not compromise my values and priorities, but I don't know that because I don't know what my values and priorities are. So therapy for me was, let's dig deeper. Let's answer all the questions. So I want a PR. Why? Because I want to be a Canadian record holder. Why? Because it's meaningful for me in whatever way that it was meaningful. So, and for me, that meaning was I was a deeply insecure person, and having these external validations made me feel less insecure. That was it at that point. So I was like, that was pretty eye-opening for me to admit to myself that I was a deeply insecure person. And now that I understand, you know, I have this predisposition to insecurities. I know exactly where those insecurities are coming from through therapy. I know exactly how to recognize myself in those negative behavior spirals. And then I have someone in my life who I can share that with and bounce that off of and say, hey, this is what I'm feeling. Are you seeing these behaviors come up with me? And she'll be honest and say, no, I think you're good. I think this is okay. Or, yeah, you better check yourself.
Could you not say that those are drivers for you, though?
Yeah, I understand where you're getting at in that the outcome is essentially the same. But I think the way to get there is important. And I think that would change if I was going to be the best in the world. I don't like.
Yeah, but that's not guaranteed to anybody.
Yeah, you're right.
See, that's part of the whole rub with all this.
Yeah.
Because you can do all the right things, take all the right risks, and still not get the end goal.
But I think if you understand the reasons behind your decision making and you have meaning towards that end goal, even like Live Winner Pro Card, that was the goal. That goal achievement lasted a couple hours and then we were on to the next goal.
Yeah. And
that level of perpetual personal progression, always reaching for something more. You cannot have that without the understanding, in my opinion. Like, you have to pause and understand.
Well, maybe it's there, but they don't understand. So let's say with your drive, probably the same as what mine is, was you don't want to feel like a piece of shit. I mean, if we just boil it all down.
I think I've said that to you a number of times.
You don't want to feel like a piece of shit.
Yep.
So if you're in the process of trying to not be that piece of shit, at least you know you're not that piece of shit because you're in the process of trying to not be that piece of shit. Even if it's not realized, it's temporarily, you're not that piece of shit. Then when it is realized, well, guess what? You still feel like you're that piece of shit. Yeah. Right? Because either you could have done more or it was a fluke or there's some, whatever that word is that I don't know how to define, where you feel like you're something, you're there, but you don't feel like, well, yeah. I try not to ever define what that is because if I don't define it, then it's not real in my world.
I love it. Willful ignorance.
Willful ignorance. But whatever that is, but, driving to not be that piece of shit, is kind of where that would kind of fall into there. But that now, if you realize what that is, does it lessen the drive?
For me, it did, and it actually amplified it.
How?
Because it let me know, like, this is what you're doing. This is where you're trying to go. This is why. Okay, the why is flawed, but you still really want that thing. So
but that thing would be validation. Self.
It can be viewed as validation from one lens. But if you reshape the why and find more truth in that, that validation becomes just simply another benchmark. So it kind of takes the pressure off of that achievement and refocuses you on the process. Because, so using the piece of shit example, which I think is a phenomenal term, if you're along this journey toward not being a piece of shit, and maybe at the end of the journey, which is death, if you continue to act like not a piece of shit and then you die, you're probably not a piece of shit.
So in essence, shit becomes fertilizer.
There you go.
And things grow.
There you go. That's a great way to put it. That was great. We played off each other.
I want to step back for a minute because we talked a little bit about, work, discipline. And so when you're dealing with clients, I want to go back into how do you teach or anchor, effort and intensity across all spectrums, right? Because we went deep into one area, but you have to anchor that too. Mm-hmm. For instance, if we're speaking about RPE, just to make something very simple, right? So if it's an RPE of 8, or your pain scale is a better example because we talked about that, that's going to change based upon your experience to whatever that pain is. I mean, if you're ever tortured someplace, it's probably going to change again, right? So now to be able to coach and to work with somebody, if you're working on, here's that pain scale of 8, you need to express what that pain scale is, but then the physician or nurse needs to understand what, it has to be anchored. Mm-hmm. Where if it's an RPE of 8, on effort, not because we can say if it's on intensity, it's 80%. 3 reps and it's easier to find. Right. But if here's a work set of 10 or 12 reps, I want you to work at an RPE of 8, right? You can't really anchor that unless you have a 10 or a 0. So across all these things with nutrition and everything else, how do you anchor that, with your clients and or with the coaches to be able to anchor that with their clients?
I think you do this very well with your clients, because you deal with a lot of clients who are coming to you with zero anchor,
and also not a lot of consistency week to week, which I think most people deal with, right? Like no day, no week is going to be exactly the same. And I think people expect every week to be that same RPE 8, right? So I think being able to, through communication, like knowing your client better and better, when they have a fantastic week, it's like, okay, that was a 10, right? I'm talking more on like the nutrition side.
Sure.
That was a 10. And then maybe the next week, maybe they're dealing with some mental health. And it's like, okay, that 10 is no longer a 10. We can't reach for that same 10. And being able to know them and their scale and helping them understand when they can pull back on that scale.
Yeah, I use the analogy of a lighthouse a lot. And I think a coach acts as a lighthouse for their client, right? They illuminate the things that need to be illuminated, and then they let them traverse through these kind of treacherous waters more safely. So we bring awareness to things. So what Liv was talking about, hey, this is a 10 out of 10 week in terms of adherence. But when we factor in this mental health piece, that might bring that 10 down to what would previously be a 6. But because you're dealing with these external things, that 6 becomes a 10. And having those conversations with them about, we're not looking for perfect. We're looking for progress. We're looking for effort. We're looking for awareness, intent, fantastic word. And having it's as you can see, a lot of my answers and our answers about the coaching process come down to communication. It comes down to having that dialogue back and forth. And that leads into why you can't have a massive caseload. But so when you talk about anchoring with regards to effort, well, a 10 out of 10 effort is just doing the best you have with what you have where you're at. If that's a 10, well then everything kind of anchors from there beneath that. Because if you didn't do the best you could, and I have a number of clients who are in Florida. They went through Hurricane Milton. And one of my clients texted me, she's like, I can't keep doing this cut. We just got a hurricane. And I replied back with, why? And we have a good relationship, so she knows that means give me more information. It's so stressful here. We're displaced. We're living at my mother-in-law's house. We don't have any of our food here. And, we can't get to the gym. Cool. Can you still track the food that you're eating? Yes. Can you still walk around the house? Yes, but I can't hit my steps. Cool. Can you get as many steps as possible? For sure. Okay, so you can move your body and you can track your food. You're in a cut. That's 10 out of 10 effort. And she was like, I never thought about it like that because I can't follow my meal plan and I don't have access to the foods that I'm supposed to access and I can't get to the gym. It's like, yeah, but the best you can do with what you have where you're at is you track the food that you're eating and hit your calories and protein and you get some steps. You're in a cut. She's blown away. But that's the level of awareness that we as coaches can bring to a situation where that 10 out of 10 is just effort and using the tools at your disposal. She didn't know that if she didn't follow her meal plan, that meant that she could still adhere. Well, I told her that. I let her know and I gave her the tools needed to be able to do that. I said, hey, the macros for your meal plan are X, Y, and Z. Get as many steps as you can. We'll evaluate after this week. Let's go do it. Whereas she could have easily been like, can't follow my meal plan, Domino's. Although I don't know if Domino's delivers in a hurricane, but.
So part of your anchoring involves reframing.
Yes. Yeah. Big time reframing. And that happens coach to coach as well. Hey, Paul, I had a really tough week. I lost 2 clients and, I didn't post on social media. Oh, okay. That's, from a business perspective, it's probably not the best week you could have had. What else is going on? Like, where are we at? Oh, my mom is in the hospital. She's, dealing with X, Y, and Z. Okay. So you could not do those things because you were supporting your family. You get a pass, right? And sometimes we give clients passes, but they have to understand that, and this is where I'll use my own personal experience. It's like, I understand your mother was in the hospital, but you're also running your business. You don't have disability insurance. You don't have mental health leave. If you don't work, you don't eat. I was in the hospital waiting for surgery myself. I did my client check-ins. This isn't me being insensitive to your situation. It's me illuminating the fact that you're the only person who pays your bills and puts food on the table. In deciding that you want to go pursue entrepreneurship, there's a trade-off involved in the decisions that you make.
The reality.
Yeah. I made a post recently that searching for work-life balance when you're just starting is going to set you up for failure. And one of the things that I preach is work-life balance, because I think you need to be a full person in order to succeed in business. But you can't optimize what you're doing until you've maximized what you're doing. And when you're starting, you have no momentum. You're fighting inertia. There is no sense of balance. There is only push. And once you've pushed and understand what that 10 out of 10 push sounds like and feels like, now you can pull back and say, what does balance look like for me in this moment? And balance is a tough one. I know you've spoken about it a lot in terms of balance in the acute doesn't exist, but it can exist in the chronic, in the year model.
It can be controlled. I mean, if you look at a teeter-totter, it's always going to sit on one side.
Exactly.
Right. And it's always going to, kind of move.
You just have to make sure that teeter-totter doesn't fall off its fulcrum.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. I mean, there's ways to integrate them, which if it's an entrepreneur, it's going to happen, to be able to integrate, but still be able to pull away.
Yeah. And with that client, that coach, it was, hey, you're not a doctor. You can be there for your mother and be in the hospital with them. Like when Liv was in the hospital with me, she's sitting on a really shitty chair on her laptop doing check-ins. She's there for me. I don't need her to keep me occupied. I don't need, she's here. She's with me. She's supporting me. But she's also got clients to serve. And I think, you're not going to be at your best probably. But what's to stop you from sharing that with your clients and being vulnerable? Because if you have clients who you have a relationship with, they're going to want to know, hey, I'm going through some stuff, but I'm still here for you. And you know what that does? That fortifies that coach-athlete relationship big time.
Yeah, builds trust.
Builds trust.
With Coach's Corner, it can get very science-based, right? So how do you balance the science-based with the bro science? right? Because just on this podcast, you know, I'll bring out people that really don't even know why they're doing what they're doing, but they're some of the best strength athletes in the world, right?
Yeah.
And then I'll have people on the other side that are really far in that science domain, right? And on both ends of this, on that huge spectrum, they'll always talk about, well, you can't look at the outliers. You know, but through my experience, everybody's an outlier.
Everybody.
You know, so, but there is a balance between those two worlds. You know, how do you navigate that balance?
I love this question because I think that true science factors in both the literature and the research with the anecdotal, because it's both evidence. What's happening in real life is still research. You're still tracking metrics. You're still looking at progress. You're still looking at outcomes. It's just not in a paper with a whole bunch of annotations. But that N of one, that you know, audience of one of your client is still giving you information every single week that you can use. Where I see the role of evidence-based is evidence-based means that you're using all of the available evidence to form your decisions. So if we start that from a deep understanding of the hard science, that develops our framework from which we can then filter the information that we're getting from our clients and have a starting point for our decision-making process. Beyond that, once you have the framework of science and you have the inputs through that filter, it becomes the art of coaching of how you apply that science. One of the coolest things we're talking about outliers is when you're dealing with the contest prep bodybuilder, when you're dealing with the world record holding powerlifter squatting 800 pounds at 198, what you'll come to realize is the rules don't apply, right? Because you can't, once you squat 800 doing a 5x5 at 80%, doesn't happen. And if it does, it's once a month because it takes them 3 weeks to recover from it.
Yeah.
Whereas with that person who only squats 400 pounds, they might be able to do a 5x5 at 80% and then a max single and progress the next week. And then however you organize your training, they can have a much more quote unquote linear progression because their recovery is there. But that 800 pound squat on that 200 pound body is a central nervous stress that body is going to have a tough time recovering from. But you wouldn't understand that unless you understand central nervous system, autonomic function, even the biochemical reaction to hard training and the recovery from hard training and stuff like that. So it's, for me, the science is the framework that creates a filter where you get input from your client and then apply the art of coaching. And then you just iterate on that over and over until you create a profile for that athlete. And each one of the athletes that you coach, whether it be competitive athlete or lifestyle athlete, because all of our clients are athletes in some ways, each one of those framework, filter, iteration, coaching art is different. So you have these multiple N of ones across all the boards. So it's about your ability to track data over time and see how these interventions are trending.
So with that, right? Well, I'm trying to help, new coaches that are coming in, right? Because there's a baseline of knowledge that they're going to have to understand.
Absolutely.
To be able to do that. But then there can be, beyond that baseline, they're just wasting way too much time.
Yes.
Digging into studies and all this other stuff when if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, they should be spending that time trying to find correlations between their N1s, all their clients.
So one of the things that I do with Coaches Corner University is I have those evidence-based lectures. I also have case studies. And I also frame my evidence-based lectures around practical application. So there's always a way to almost create a flow chart of if this, then that for all of the interventions that are proposed, for all of the frameworks that I propose. And that's one of the things that I truly believe in the art of coaching. So as a young coach, you have to develop, in my opinion, the more robust of an understanding of science that you have, the better of a coach you can be.
Yeah.
Where we see the problem is you get tied to that and you forget about the fact that coaching is client-centered and that person is the driver. So if this person, whatever their goal is, they want to achieve it in whatever timeline, well, you can either apply the science directly to them and hope that they do it, or you can almost, like, I would say, You either have the ability to transform the client and fit them to the science, or you use the science as a framework and fit it to the client. In the latter example, you're going to have much more success than if you try to change the client.
Well, yeah, but with the example that you gave, it would have even more power because the timeline may not be realistic, and the science will be able to tell you that this person can't lose 80 pounds in 8 weeks.
I mean, you could fast them.
I mean, you could.
So,
right. Well, I guess I should say what the desired outcome is.
Right,
so
exactly.
Without losing muscle.
Yeah, and that's where the coaching relationship comes in. Because say you have that. Let's make it a bit more realistic. Want to lose 20 pounds in 15 weeks. Say their person is not that fat. Say it's me. Okay, I'm fat by my own standard right now. But if I tried to lose 20 pounds in 15 weeks, I'd be emaciated. If I come through the door with that goal and I'm looking at you as my coach, you could either approach that and say, hey, that's not possible. That's stupid. Or you could dive into, hey, why do you want to do that? What's with the number? Is it attached to something meaningful? Let's have a conversation about it. And so I can look at it and say, well, thermodynamics would dictate that if you want to lose 20 pounds in 15 weeks, we have to create X calorie deficit every single week consistently as you're dealing with metabolic adaptation of that person. Likely you're going to have tissue loss and all these things. So you could, but they're not going to be happy. If you want to keep that client and you want to actually sign them to your coaching, that is the perfect opportunity for you to start the coach-athlete relationship. Honesty, education, empathy. Now we see how that person responds to it and create a plan of like, what if that 15 weeks turns into 25 weeks? Okay, that's 10 more weeks. What if that 20 pounds turns into 10, but you improve body composition and don't lose any muscle mass? Oh, that sounds pretty cool, right? So if I was too tied to the evidence, you say, hey man, your goal's dumb. You're probably not going to like the outcome. This is stupid. I don't think anyone would have that conversation in that way, but it's like we're applying ends of the spectrum.
Sure, but it may go through their head. They may not express it, but they may say that.
Yeah, for sure. So that's why I think the framework of science is so important. The art of how you apply it has everything to do with your understanding of communication and psychology. So one of the biggest things that I will tell coaches, especially if they come to me with a background in physiology or some sort of, postgraduate education, is you probably want to read less about training and nutrition and read more about people.
Now, what if it's the inverse?
Well, then you attack the weaknesses, right? And there are a lot of people who are phenomenal at dealing with people, but don't understand the science to enough of a degree to actually understand the data that's being filtered through. Because I mentioned, we have the framework of science that creates a filter, and then we feed in the data from the client. If the person doesn't have a good enough filter, they're not going to know what to do with the data from the client. So then they can't. You're essentially at a roadblock, whichever side of that you fall on the weakness end, you're going to have roadblocks.
So if, say it's your company, right? Yep. And then you have systems and processes for the training and the nutrition, and they're basically science driven, is then what?
Yep.
Then would you look for the coach that's the better communicator? Because they don't necessarily are going to have that big understanding of that science if they have the communication ability and it's already built into the system.
Well, empathy is not something that you can easily teach.
That's true.
Right. So if you have someone who's good at communicating, is very empathetic, is great with people, as long as they're willing to learn, they're always going to be able to develop their knowledge and their skill base and be able to build that filter.
I think that's way easier. I think teaching someone science is way easier than teaching someone people.
Yeah.
Without question. Full disclosure for me, it took me working with disabled populations in a like workplace disability standpoint to actually learn how to deal with people, because I was very much a science guy, and I was coming from a high performance background where these kids had no choice but to participate. So I came from you know, Div 1 NCAA motherfucking kids in a weight room to when I stepped out of coaching for a brief period and I started working with Susan at 52 years old, who was afraid to go outside. That was a stark realization that my coaching style needed to change. And what you realize is that the majority of the clients you face are closer to Susan than they are to that Division 1 football player.
No, I get that, right? Because they're in a system, they're in an ecosystem that keeps that more in check.
Yeah.
You know, the scheduling and all the other kind of stuff where you're Susan, Karen, or whatever you want to call it, they're in a completely different ecosystem that probably isn't even conductive.
No.
You know, to that, because they're surrounded by distractions, you know, all the time. You know, it's Division 1, their cafeteria and food's kind of like laid out.
You know what, man? Even then, I remember my first job at USF when I was there was to supervise training table and go get the kids who wouldn't show up. Because you had to force them to eat free food. Crazy. I couldn't believe that.
But see, that's still different though than somebody that's surrounded by, you know, bad food choices everywhere they go.
Of course.
You know, so it completely different coaching, you know, as well with that, but they're still all human. Where the way I like to define a lot of strength athletes and people, just let's say athletes, because a lot of people are going to hire a coach, or I would say are going to fall into an athlete. Yep. Like your general pop person's not going to hire a coach unless they're probably not even going to train. We look at the majority of the people who don't train.
That's interesting. That's interesting you point that out, because at first you were talking, I was like, I don't know if I agree. And then you're like, the majority of people actually don't train. I was like, yep, that's probably the majority of people have no desire to be in a weight room right now.
Exactly. Most definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, population studies are going to show that, right?
Sure.
You know, based upon all that. And so you're working with those. So it's kind of the same. So the way I would define the strength athletes is they're basically just gen pop people who are really strong and consistent in the weight room. So when you start exploring a little bit deeper into the strength athletes, it still falls into the same struggles: sleep, nutrition, recovery, that absolutely your gen pop people are going to deal with. So sometimes I'll have personal trainers on that just work in the gen pop just for that reason, right? Forget what they say about the training. It may not apply to the strength athlete or somebody that wants to lift bigger weights, but pay attention to how they're working with their clients on all these other disciplines, because that's you. And they don't like to hear that, but it is the reality and the truth.
Yep.
You know, we see it over and over again. And it's also, they think they can out-train the bad diet, you know, all those other they can out-drug bad recovery, you know, and to some extent, maybe to a point.
Have you ever seen that guy on Instagram that tries to out-exercise his diet?
No.
He'll eat 16,000 calories of some sort of food and then go run 16,000 calories.
It's a fuckload of running, man.
Yeah. He runs like a couple marathons and stuff. He'll eat like a 16,000 calorie McDonald's meal and then just go running. It's hilarious.
Well, I mean, we see that on a smaller scale with the binging and shit like that, but they never burn the calories.
No.
I think they don't understand how many.
And I think that's why he does it, but it's just a hilarious account. My buddy Dean showed it to me because Dean's a big proponent of high step counts and high-flux dieting, which is something that both of us are big proponents of. It's like driving up physical activity, because it leads to more of a mindset of abundance with the dieting process of I can do more activity, which means I can eat more food and still lose weight. Plus it's more sustainable over time, as long as you have the time to invest in these high step counts, because steps take a lot of time. But
what would you say is a high step count?
For me, a high step count, anything over 10,000 would be high. Yeah. That was one thing that I focused on very heavily with my recovery process, was as soon as I was able to quote unquote walk, it was driving up my step count as much as I could, because I wanted more movement, more blood flow. And quite frankly, I didn't love the way I looked after 6 weeks in a bed. So my step count lately, actually yesterday we got up to like 16,000 steps, but usually I'm around 13 to 15,000 steps a day.
Now, after your recovery, I'm going to make an assumption, but I want to put it out there so people know, were you focusing on proper gait mechanics?
I was trying to. So one of the things that I have been doing for a number of years is I spend the majority of my day, including training barefoot or in barefoot shoes. Shout out barefoot shoes. And that's actually been a challenge. That left leg I mentioned before the podcast, there's something going on with my tibial rotation. So I'm walking more on the outside of my foot than I am before. So my fibula is like cracking like a knuckle all the time. And I'm having issues like maintaining extension on that side. So it's something as I'm walking, I'm being conscious of my gait pattern, where I'm contacting the floor, and it's slowly getting better. Also doing a couple of rehab drills along the process, but it was weird because at first, anytime I was in hip extension, so as my foot hit the ground and came behind my body, I couldn't flex my knee because I didn't have the mobility in my quad yet. So my steps were very short. And your gait pattern when your steps are short is going to be different when your gait pattern extends.
Yes.
So I've been kind of dealing with that over the last little bit, and it's made some significant improvements. That was one of the issues. The other issue was with essentially my knee flexion with deep hip flexion is a little bit off, because I remember, if people remember, my left hip was the problem with my knee pain prior to my injury. My left hip still isn't great. I don't think it ever will be great, but as I'm accessing more hip flexion on that side, there's some different mechanics happening at the knee and the ankle that I didn't have before. So that's been an adjustment. So a lot of the work that I'm doing is very slow tempo, a lot of pauses, a lot of isometrics, working on, where my foot and my knee are in space and stuff like that.
Well, I think that's important because I've seen this a lot with hip replacements. Normally they'll get one, right? And then when they come back, because they can walk fast. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're mobile in 3 or 4 days.
Oh, wow.
And they're not focusing on the proper mechanics. So then you see them a year later and there's that little limp swing,
right?
That's not, and it's like, fucker, all you had to do was slow down and think about it, to be able to, because that will become your new pattern,
right?
And the short steps as an example, you're conscious of it to try to bring it back, because there's, with the step counts and stuff like that, there's a million steps, that could have been laid with that, which is enough to ingrain a whole different motor pattern.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a really eye-opening process. Like this whole rehab process, from like, I dove in right from the beginning. As soon as I got out of surgery, I was researching, I was on the phone. Like, actually, one of the first phone calls I took was Matt Nickel, which blew my mind. I got a text from Matt that said, "Hey, can I call you?" I was like, "Sure, Matt Nickel, you can call." Someone I've looked up to my entire career wants to call me. He's like, "How can I help you?" I was like, "I don't know, man. Like, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm thinking of doing." And he actually lent me his PEMF machine so that I could use it at home. We had that at the house for about 8 weeks. I was on the phone with Ken Kanakin. I was, any rehab provider. Danny was a huge help to me of understanding, hey, these are the things you want to look out for. And to her credit, from a professional standpoint, Danny was someone who I worked with for a couple of years leading into the meet and ultimately the accident. She was like, remotely working with you, I don't think I can serve you to the best ability. You need to see someone in person who can get their hands on you. I was like, okay, cool, I can do that. Was lucky enough to get linked up with Ryan Morrison, who used to work with the Toronto Maple Leafs. So he's been helping me with my rehab in the clinic a few times a week. Immediately started with, okay, you can't bend your knee. We're going to do BFR. We're going to do a ton of leg raises, straight leg work, hip extension, abduction, adduction, which was horrendous. If you've ever used a clinical BFR cuff,
yes,
it blew my mind how much worse it was than tying knee wraps around my hips.
Oh yes.
So I did a ton of that. I was doing that 3 times a week. Then as soon as I could get in the pool, Liv would drive me to the pool. I'd have my knee braces on in the pool, just kicking my legs for 30 minutes a couple times a week. That helped a ton. As soon as I was able to walk, it was 1,000 steps, then it was 2,000, then 3,000, slowly, gradually increasing the step count while keeping up with all these drills. I did my isometric drills every single day, trying to get more flexion out of the knee. As soon as I got full 120 degrees of flexion, which I don't think I even had 120 degrees before the surgery, but I got that. Then it was, okay, start back at 30 degrees, start loading in very slow tempo, whether it be terminal knee extensions or getting in the leg press and just pushing against the leg press with the isometrics. Every week, isometrics down, 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 loading down, 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 down. And now, while reintegrating training, implementing isometrics into the training. So let's take a leg curl. You're going to do 2 sets. The first one is going to be a heavy set. The second set is going to have a 5-second isometric every 5th rep in that shortened position to re-ingrain that shortened, that knee flexion. That was huge. Better motor control. I'm also driving intensity in the training. And so I'm able to train through the rehab, which is something I learned from Danny and all these things that we did even before the surgery that I'm now implementing into training as well. So it's been a really cool process of how to go about it. One of the things I did differently is, listen, my wife's a wellness competitor and my legs look fucking stupid when I stand beside her because they're so skinny. It was.
That's what they make pants for, though.
Yeah, but I'm always sweating. So I was like, okay, I need to grow my legs back. So I've been training legs every 3rd day, which means my upper body training has to be pulled back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. So I pulled back my upper body training and have been focusing much more on lower body. So essentially I have like 2 lower body days that I alternate and do one every 3rd day. At first it was hip thrust, RDL, terminal knee extension. I was able to do BFR leg extensions pretty quickly, so I was doing those. Then it was, okay, I can leg press now with partial ranges of motion, so I'll use a yoga block in the leg press to have a stopper every couple sessions, change the orientation of the yoga block on the safety to try and get more range of motion. So it was very progressive in terms of that. And what I came to realize is that because I was so consistent early on with my rehab while I was immobile, as soon as I hit the floor and was able to start moving, everything was quick. Every couple days. I remember on the leg curl, the first time I got in it, I did like 40 pounds for 11 to failure. The next time, 5 days later, was 65 pounds for 17. And I was blown away because I was like, I understand my CNS is kind of downregulated, but I didn't realize how much downregulation took place, especially in a reciprocal pattern like at leg curl that you'll get some co-contraction of the quad, but not too much. I was blown away at how quickly I got back up to like full strength in those movements.
Mm-hmm.
Leg extension is still a slow one. Leg press, I actually have more range now than I did before, but I'm progressing load very slowly there, doing sets of 20 with slow eccentrics and pauses, just slowly getting tolerance back in those deep flexion positions.
Yeah, so I would think as your effort will begin to increase in that, mm-hmm. and the tempo will increase, the frequency will drop. You can get away with the 3 times because the load and the firing isn't explosive. Which is understandable. Every rehab I've ever done is kind of the same way.
It's high frequency, get as much exposure to those ranges.
Control tempo and just try to get the ranges that you can get, and then slowly over time, it comes back.
One of the things I did, to my credit, which is something I wouldn't have done prior, is I still have yet to have a day where I did too much in the gym and woke up more swollen than the previous day. So I'm using my swelling and discomfort as a gauge of, did I push too hard? And so kind of giving myself permission to go a little bit slower because I don't want to teeter over that line and have a regression.
No,
it's not worth it.
Yeah, I've done that. You don't want to do that.
I could see you as a guy who would do that.
Yeah,
Dave.
My second hip led to that, and I was in a recliner for a month because it swelled so much that it took that long, to get it all out. And it was like, you think you're being smart, but then it's like, fuck.
Yeah. Are we cool to talk about like peptides and stuff like that? Yeah. So one of the things I dove into is like the peptide sciences and the things that I could take. I was familiar with the BPC TB500 protocol. And I was like, okay, well, I'll definitely do that. Why not? And I've taken GH in the past, so do that as well. Anything that I can possibly do to increase
local.
Didn't do the GH local. I did the TB and BPC local, and I also researched a peptide called GHK copper, which I was never familiar with before, which essentially is focused exclusively on collagen synthesis. And so for me with the tendon rupture, I was like, okay, let's get some collagen in there. So I did 500 micrograms of BPC and TB per day with 2 milligrams of GHK, and all 3 of those per day per knee, which was very expensive with the 2 injuries. And then I ended up just doing 4 IUs of growth hormone at night every day. And I'd started that basically as soon as we got home. And from there, I actually was researching Anavar at very low dosage. So I used 10 milligrams of Anavar as well, just to, again, for collagen synthesis and to prevent muscle wasting. And throughout that whole process, like, my legs came back pretty quick.
Yeah.
They're definitely not back to where they were, but the muscle bulk has come back pretty good. And then combine that with the isometrics, the BFR, the muscle stim 3 times a day, the 4 hours of PEMF, and making that my full-time job. Plus, from a nutrition perspective, my nutrition was dialed in. I focused very heavily on gut health. I actually took oral BPC as well. Supplementing with collagen, supplementing with additional vitamin C, which is a cofactor for collagen synthesis, supplementing with more K2 and calcium for the bone healing, curcumin, high dose omega-3, boswellia, which is a tendon inflammation assistance. Anything else in specific for that?
How long with the peptides?
I did the GHK for 10 weeks. I'm still doing the BPC and TB right now.
Locally still?
Yeah, still locally.
Okay.
Which is weird. Like, I basically just traced my incision. So it's like, at first I couldn't even feel the needle going in, but now that I have sensation back, it's fucking weird putting it in.
Were you able to get through the scar tissue?
No, the needle would bend.
Yeah. I asked because I've had the same.
It's gross.
Yeah. Yes. Same kind of issues with that.
Scarring's weird. Did you have any issues with your scar, like adhering to the tissue underneath?
No.
That's one thing, because my scar extends onto my kneecap. So underneath my scar at first was actually really sticky. So I've been hammering it with a Theragun every day. And in my PT sessions, he's shock waving it. I want to get a hand on, Ken was telling me about this device called an MPS Dolphin that essentially reverses the polarity of the scar and like removes it, but no one in my area has one. So maybe next time. Yeah. Hopefully. Maybe not next time. No, next time? There won't be a next time.
Were there any topics you guys had I didn't bring up?
I don't know. I think we touched on a lot. I think, one of the things that I was really excited to share was the process of, Liv winning her pro card, and then how we navigated everything leading into and after that. One thing that she touched on that she didn't go into enough detail was, she said she gave everything to her prep. She said she gave everything to bodybuilding for a year, from that last national show to this pro card. And one thing that I would like to say is, like, she did it. Like, we even moved to Houston for the winter. We left Canada, moved to Houston for 3 months. Her prep for that show was a whole year. She treated her entire off season and prep with a level of consistency of a professional. And I think I just don't think that should be glanced over. So,
well, yeah, I mean, that's also one thing when you asked what I learned from that prep. I think being able to treat your entire year, your life as a prep, and it's not like anything needs to change going into a prep. And that was a big part of being able to finish the show and get back to what balance is for me, because I treated this as like my life, my lifestyle. It wasn't like, okay, flip the switch and I'm on prep now. It's everything's going to stay the same.
Would also put you in a good position to make a good decision if you want to walk or not. Right? Because if that's what it takes to be able to get there, then that's probably what it's going to take to be able to stay there and to move forward. Yeah. Especially if you look back and you're not asking, well, what if I would have done this? What if I would have done that?
Exactly.
Right. And now you can look at that with that balance and say, with all these other things that I want to do, I'm not sure this can stack with business or having a family or whatever it's going to be, because you know exactly what that is.
Yeah. I know exactly what it takes.
Yes.
So it's like deciding, do I want to compete again? Do I want to do a pro show? Yeah. For the next year a bit, I'm willing to dedicate that much of my life towards this. And everything else after the fact is always going to be there.
Yeah. I mean, it was funny when we got married. Liv's 8 years younger than me. So when we got married, I was like, okay, like, I just want to have a kid before I'm 40. Can we just have a kid before I'm 40? And so I'll be 37 in a couple weeks, and after she won her pro card, I turned to her. I was like, I know our plan was to have kids now, but if you want to compete, just know that I support you through this. Just keep your promise.
Yeah.
She's like, okay.
Yeah.
So we'll do another season and then devote the next season of life to that.
Yeah. How can people find you? Best way.
Either of us on our own personal pages on Instagram. So mine's Olivia X Oneid, Paul's Paul Oneid.
Paul Oneid.
Then we have our Master Athletic Performance page, which is Master Athletic
Performance
at the end.
And then, our website's www.masterathletic.com. And then if you want to get in touch with me for mentorship or anything related to continuing education, you can visit www.coachescorneru.com or mentorship.coachescorneru.com.
Yeah. All those are in your link trees,
Yep.
which are on Instagram, and we'll have the link in the bio. I want to thank you guys for coming out. It's been a great time, and we're done.
It's not going to your organs. So your liver, your kidneys, your lungs, your heart are not getting the support from your body that they need because you've given your body this very strong signal that it needs to go to muscle.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were to stay on a huge amount of androgens for never mind years, decades, yeah, that's when you see organ damage, things start to grow,